Yeah, they'll make it fine. Yep. Item 1, opening of the meeting. Good evening, everyone, and councillors and officers, and all our viewers live streaming for tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Julie Williams, and today is my first council meeting in my newly role as the Mayor. It's a huge honour and a privilege to be elected the Mayor for the City of Darebin. And alongside me is my Deputy Mayor, Councillor Suzanne Newton, and we're both very committed to working together to deliver the positive outcomes for our community. So it is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's council's meeting, and I declare the meeting open at 6:06. I'd like to also do the acknowledgement of traditional owners. Darebin Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri Wurrung people. As the traditional owners and custodians of the land and waters, we all call Darebin, and pays respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Council pays respect to all other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders communities in Darebin. Council recognises and pays tribute to the diverse culture, resilience and heritage of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge the leadership of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and the right to self-determination in the spirit of mutual understanding and respect. I would like to introduce you to our councillors and senior staff with us here this evening. I have Councillor Emily Dimitriadis, Councillor Gaetano Greco, Councillor Tom Hannon, Councillor Tim Lawrence, Councillor Trent McCarthy, Councillor Suzanne Newton, our Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Susan Rennie and Councillor Lena Messina. And to our officers tonight, I'd like to say that this evening we have Peter Smith, our CEO, Jodie Watson, General Manager and Governance and Engagement, Sam Hewlett, General Manager and Operations and Capital, Kylie Bennett, General Manager Communities, Catherine Pound, Acting General Manager, City Sustainability and Strategy, Jacinta Stevens, Manager Corporate Governance. May I also welcome Mr. John Watson, our Municipal Monitor. Given that today is his last meeting of the year, I'd like to acknowledge John Watson for all his guidance and support during the time that he has been here at Darebin. So I'd like to say thank you and let's get underway. So do we have any apologies this evening? We have no apologies, so our next item is disclosures of conflicts and interest. Councillors and officers, are there any interest or conflicts of interest to declare this evening? Councillor Messina.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Williams, my understanding is there is a matter of urgent item to address an aged care issue, and I'd like to declare at this stage that I'll nominate a conflict of interest due to past employment, but I will ask governance officers and legal representations to review that in the future.
Okay, so if you can kindly fill out the forms for that, that would be greatly appreciated. Are there any other conflicts from officers? Yes?
Through you, Mayor, I'd just like to declare an interest in relation to 9.6, the governance report, as councillors will be appointed to the CEO Employment Matters Committee. Although that's an interest, I don't believe there's a conflict in relation to that, so I'll remain in the meeting, but I'll declare my interest.
Thank you. If there were no further conflicts of interest, I will move over to item number 5, which is confirmation of minutes of the previous minutes. Councillors, could I please have the motion of the adoption of the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 28th of November and the special council meeting that was held on the 30th of November 2022. Do I have a mover for those minutes? Two hands went up at the same time. I'll go with Councillor McCarthy as the mover. Are you happy to move the officer's recommendation? And Councillor Messina is the seconder. I'll put that to vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 6, Occupational health and safety responsibilities. The health and safety and wellbeing of the community and those in the chamber, or those virtually joining us this evening. We have an obligation to ensure that the working environment and public forums are safe for everyone, both emotionally and physically. So, Tim, may I ask a leave from the chair to make a public statement? I believe that at this point you have something.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to seek leave from the chair to make a public statement.
Okay. So, yes, you have permission to do so, Councillor Lawrence. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Williams, I'd like to make the following personal statement. An arbiter has found that I engaged in misconduct within the meaning of the Local Government Act 2020, and I sincerely apologise to all my fellow councillors for falling short of the standards required of me.
Thank you. I'll go over to item number 7, which is public question time. Public question time will go for 30 minutes. If we exceed that time, then I will ask for a procedural motion to be extended for another 30 minutes. Can I kindly remind you that you have only 3 questions that you can ask, and it cannot exceed more than 2 minutes. Be mindful that this is question time only, so only questions can be asked during this time. Questions relating to notice of motions, petitions or urgent business will not be accepted in accordance with the governance rules. Like questions grouped together, first person who submitted like question can ask their question. For community members who have registered to ask a question virtually, when I call out your name, you will automatically be unmuted and your camera be turned on by a staff member, so you can ask your question then. Just a little reminder that there is no questions to be taken from people in the gallery unless they have submitted their question by 12 p.m. today, in line with our council governance rules. So, first up this evening, I have Pauline Brockett of Thornbury. Is Pauline in the gallery this evening? No? If not, then I'd like to hand that over to our officers who'd be more than happy to ask the question. Thank you, on her behalf.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Pauline's question is, will our council give consideration under the Local Government Act 1989, Schedule 10, Clause 5, power to name roads, erect signs and require permission to be numbered, to making it a requirement for all properties to clearly display a number and for all street corners to indicate the street name? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I go over to our officers, one of our GMs who would be kindly enough to answer Pauline's question this evening? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to Pauline for the question. I understand an officer has called Pauline to understand her concerns in relation to any specific places and will respond formally to her in the new year. Council's local law already requires all property owners to have a street number that's large enough and free from obstructions so that it can be clearly read from the street. We don't have officers checking all properties for street numbers, so we do encourage residents to report any issues they are aware of, and our compliance staff will follow up reports of missing or illegible street numbers with property owners. In regard to street signs, we have many across the city at most intersections, and we welcome requests for more if there are particular needs or gaps, and our transport safety staff will consider any street sign requests. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Second question this evening is from Miranda Sharp of Elphington. Is Miranda in the gallery this evening? And if so, would she like to step up to the microphone and ask her question this evening? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is that okay?
Yes.
I did put in a submission this morning relating to item 13.1 in the agenda tonight, so I presume I can present the submission within the 3 minutes.
Yep.
This is question time. This is not submission, so you get another chance regarding submissions. So if you have a question, you can do both. But at this point in time, along the agenda, we're actually just doing question time. Do you actually have your question? I believe there was one submitted.
I do. I have submitted 3 questions, but they relate to the item, so I assumed that I would be making the submission statement first.
No, you'll be making your question. This is question time, so you have submitted 3 questions.
I have.
Can you kindly ask those questions, and we'll have our officers answer those, and then when we get to submission time, then we will actually ask you for your submissions then.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. My name's Miranda. I'm from Melbourne Farmers Markets at the Alphington Community Food Hub, Melbourne Innovation Centre in Alphington. My question to Council is, given that our commercial licence at Melbourne Innovation Centre expires at the end of December 2022, that's in less than 2 weeks, I would like to ask Council how it can commit to discuss and resolve this with us, with our business, a social enterprise involving 8 full-time staff and 35 other businesses on our site, a number of social enterprises and charities, and given that we've spent 18 months trying to resolve this, and there are very acute situation with other tenants on site, we obviously hope for a resolution. I wanted to ask how this will come about.
Then how about we ask your other 2 questions, and then I'll go over to our officers and they can answer all 3 questions together, if that's okay, Miranda?
Sure. My second question is, will Council consider giving a licence directly to Melbourne Farmers Markets and the other enterprises currently on site with expiring licences, independently of Melbourne Innovation Centre? And the third question is, given that we're not in buildings with the asbestos hazard, will Council confirm the implications elsewhere will not affect us?
Thank you. You can resume your seat, and I'll hand the question over to our officer, Jodie Watson, who will answer your 3 questions. Thank you, Miranda, and we'll call you back up shortly for submissions. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Miranda. We value the work of Melbourne Farmers Market and the role that it plays in supporting small enterprises within our community. I understand an officer has contacted you today to provide a sense of contact and reassurance. In response to your first question, I acknowledge that the Farmers Market has an existing licence with the Melbourne Innovation Centre that expires on 31st of December 2022 from my understanding. The Melbourne Innovation Centre is in control of the site as the tenant of council, and from that perspective, that lease expires at the end of May 2023. There's no information that council has that would prevent an extension to your licence being granted by the Melbourne Innovation Centre, as you have requested of them. In the short term, we're advocating on your behalf for MIC to continue the market with a licence to operate until the end of the lease term, given that is the current timeframe that we're looking at, and we're not aware of any safety issues that would prevent that occurring. In response to the second question, as I've explained, Council does have a current lease with the Melbourne Innovation Centre over the whole of the site at 2 Wingrove Street in Alphington. Council is unable to issue a direct licence with the Melbourne Farmers Market until such time as the existing lease arrangements either expires, are terminated, or there is mutual agreement to vary the lease as it currently stands. Again, Council is fully supportive of the Melbourne Farmers Market. In response to your third question, I acknowledge that the farmers market hasn't been disrupted by the most recent instance that we have on site, and we have no information at hand at this time that indicates that there should be any future disruption for the Melbourne farmers market. I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you very much. We do have a follow-up question. We have another person, which is a Julia Lady. I think that's how you say it, of Alphington. Is Julia in the gallery this evening? You are. Julia, would you like to come and step up to the microphone and ask your question? Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to ask these questions. Yes, I'm also a small business owner at number 2 Wingrove Street. the same as the Melbourne Farmers Market. I'm a mushroom farmer. And I'm just also concerned about the state of our licence renewal, given that it's due to expire at the end of December. And just trying to understand why we couldn't possibly have greater security with regards to tenure in the long term, given the investment and contribution that we're making to the community and the space in general. And my third question is, given the state of or what's happening with our neighbours with La Serene Brewery, for example, how can we continue to operate and invest in good faith despite the lack of security and treatment due to the treatment of our neighbours who have been locked out and unable to operate? There's just a bit of concern there. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. You can resume your seat in the gallery. I'll hand that over to our officers, Jodie Watson again. Thank you, Jodie.
Thank you for the question, Julia. I hope that my earlier response to Miranda also assisted with your question. Certainly my understanding is that you're a sub-licensee of the Melbourne Farmers Market at the site, and of course we do value the work that the Melbourne Farmers Market does. Is that correct? Oh, you've got a licence under MAC. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Certainly the same principles of my response to Miranda would apply to you in terms of there being no reason why your current arrangement could not be extended to the end of the current lease agreement, which is until May 2023. Certainly the review of that lease, will commence in the new year with a view to establishing the future arrangement for that. But in the meantime, there is no reason why your current licence could not be extended beyond 31st of December if that remains an issue also for yourself, which it certainly appears to. We're also happy to advocate to MIC for that licence to be extended, as we are for Melbourne Farmers Market at this time. I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you, Jodie. I have a question from Caroline Lunt of Northcote. Is Caroline in the gallery this evening? Caroline, would you like to step up to the microphone and please state your name, your full name and the suburb that you're from? Would be greatly appreciated.
Carolyn Lunt, Northcote, and congratulations, Mayor.
Thank you.
It's your first time, it's great. My first question, shall I go on? Is when will the City of Darebin return to direct democracy when the residents can work with councillors and council officers?
Yep, you can ask your other two questions.
Okay, question two.
Thank you.
When will Jika in the park be accessible for use by residents? And the third question is, what's been spent or what's been the budget by council on this centre since it closed in 2020 when I was working there, including the cost of removing the outdoor infrastructure, building of raised garden beds, cost of plants, the construction of concrete seats, as well as the 9 new sitting beds. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. You can resume your seat back into the gallery.
Could I have a show and tell time, a very quick one?
Because we haven't been, you can, but not at this point in time. We can give that to our officers and we can submit that in.
It's just showing my 5 weeks of rubbish. It's gone up from 30 grams a week to 76. Thought I'd just show Lena Messina. She knows all about my litter collection. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Appreciate that. The first question will be answered by Jodie Watson and the second and third question will be answered by Sam Hewlett, our 2 officers. So thank you.
Thank you for the question, Carolyn, and thank you for sharing your home waste with us. That's an impressively small amount. Congratulations. Carolyn, residents have the opportunity to meet face-to-face, either individually or collectively, with the Mayor and or their ward councillor, or group of councillors to provide feedback on matters of importance to them. Council will continue to hold forums and seek community input to enable councillors to be well informed when making decisions across our municipality. And thank you for your continued interest in community engagement. I'll pass over now to Sam Hewlett for the next 2 questions.
In relation to Jika, Carolyn, Jika in the park can be booked by residents for various activities, and a number of community members are currently using it. You can get in contact with Jika either through their website or directly. In relation to what's been spent, other than essential safety measures by council, nothing. JICA receives some small grants from other agencies to undertake the works that you refer to, but as I say, council didn't contribute to those.
Thank you. Our next question, I believe, is from Karen Hagan of Thornbury, who's not in attendance, but I will ask if Karen is in the gallery. No? I'll hand that over to our officers who will ask that question on behalf of Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Karen's question is Darebin Council monitoring noise and air pollution over the local areas as a result of the new flight path? There has been a marked increase in aircraft noise. I realise it is a federal issue, however, when requesting council support for Preston Market was told state government. Hopefully Darebin Council has a role to raise local resident issues.
Thank you. I'll hand that over to one of our officers, which is Catherine Pound, who will actually answer that question. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to Karen for the question and also for the time that she took today to discuss this item in further detail with an officer. Darebin is not monitoring noise and air quality levels that might be associated with flight paths. However, we encourage anyone who's concerned by noise and air quality relating to flight paths to report those concerns to Air Services Australia, who manage complaints, and will provide those details on to Karen. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is Serena O'Mealy from Kingsbury. I believe she is attending virtually. Yes?
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Serena. Can you kindly ask your three questions, please? I will have our officers unmute your video now. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm actually from Reservoir. Kingsbury's my postal address. So my first question is, graffiti's out of control all over Darebin, on buildings, on the base of power poles, on junction boxes and so on. It gives our city a strong air of urban decay. One of the worst examples is in West Garth Village, where even the sign welcoming people to the village has been graffiti. And scaffolding was recently left out by builders that allowed people easy access to the tops of the historic buildings, where graffiti is making them look decrepit. What steps is Darebin Council taking to address the issue of increasing amounts of graffiti in our city, including in West Garth? And I have circulated some photos of some of that graffiti. Second question is about election materials. A number of fringe state election candidates covered light poles and power poles with stickers and corflutes to advertise their runs for office. What steps has or is Darebin Council taking to deal with this littering? And the third question is regarding Clements Reserve. Clements Reserve, sorry, that should say Clements Reserve, not just Clements, is again overgrown with weeds, which is damaging the rewilding of the park. The entrances to the park have recently been slashed instead of weeded, which is likely to have caused damage to the Indigenous plants. In other areas, enormous chest-high weeds, including dandelions, are obliterating the Indigenous plants. What steps will be taken to ensure that these areas are properly weeded and maintained rather than slashed or poisoned? Thank you.
Questions, Serena. I'll hand that over to our officer, Sam Hewlett, who would be happy to answer your three questions.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks, Serena, for your questions. In relation to graffiti, officers regularly report instances of graffiti on assets that don't belong to the council, and we're prevented from cleaning that graffiti from those assets. In relation to West Garth, we offer a graffiti removal program, but we generally don't do that graffiti removal above ground level. We will write to those owners again, those property owners again, as we've done previously, and invite them to take part in Council's graffiti programs, removal programs. In relation to the littering question, Serena, Council this week wrote to all state election candidates to remind them of their obligations to remove all political posters now that the state election has been completed. And in relation to Clements, we've made arrangements to have council's contractors attend the site this week and address those maintenance issues now and into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Question. It's yes, people have to remove their election materials, but specifically what I'm talking about is littering.
We've finished with your 3 questions. I'm sorry, Serena. If you have follow-up questions, can I get you to actually get in contact with Sam Hewlett, who would be happy to have that further discussion with you. Is that okay?
Sorry, Mayor, just to be clear, he didn't answer my question. He didn't answer question 2. He answered a different question. Sorry, Sam. The question was about littering, not about people putting up legitimate election materials and taking them down.
Well, can we take your question on notice, and I'll get Sam Hewlett to actually contact you, and then he can follow that up with you, if that's okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Serena. I appreciate that. Next question over to John Nugent of Epping. Is John in the gallery? John, thank you. Would you like to step up to the microphone and ask your questions, please?
Thank you, Mayor, and congratulations on your appointment as Mayor. I have 3 questions tonight. But before I start, Mayor, I asked you a question which you referred me to Miss Watson, and Miss Watson said she needed 5 minutes to think about it. It was about asking, can I get my questions or the answers that the council give me in writing, because there's other subjects that I would like to follow. Now, one of the questions I had tonight is very closely to what Miss Slunt gave in there, but I couldn't find the answer in Miss...
John, I'd be more than happy to have this discussion after tonight's meeting.
Well, I won't be here,
me?
No, it doesn't deserve you. I just asked you and you threw me on to Miss Watson. I'm asking Miss Watson. She made her mind up.
No. Can I ask you to ask your 3 questions?
Certainly, but can I get an answer first, Julie?
No, because I actually put an officer on the spot, which probably wasn't her responsibility, and that is a fault of myself, so I apologise to the officer in reference to that.
So I don't get an answer if I'm going to get these back in?
I can give you an answer once I've followed up who the appropriate person who can help respond in writing to these 3 questions that you're asking this evening. So can I hand that over to you to ask your 3 questions,
Certainly
please?
then. Ms Mayor Williams, earlier this year,
Thank you.
I asked the question about the Christmas decorations and the celebration of the Chinese New Year. Once again, this council hasn't done anything to improve the decorations in Central Preston, and I'm willing to help this council out with some ideas if they need it. Will this council celebrate the next Chinese New Year like it did 2 years ago, where many cultures celebrated that time of the year also? That's question 1. Question 2, my question is about why is the customer service front office is closed over the main days in the holiday season by only leaving the phone room open. Residents will only get lip service and will have to wait till after Christmas to get problems solved. If the counter is left open, the staff can answer the residents' inquiries, take payments, answer the phones and carry out other duties. The front office was only closed for one reason, and that was for 1 year by COVID. But it seems this council management don't seem to worry about its ratepayers. That's question 2. And the last question, Mayor Williams, can you please advise when will the residents can submit their questions from the floor instead of submitting a minimum or submitting a minimum of 6 hours before they are asked at the customer service office? Yeah.
Thank you, John. I appreciate your questions. If you can kindly resume your seat back in the gallery, I'll have 2 of our officers to answer your questions. So over to Kylie to answer your first question, and Jodie will answer your second and third question. Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, John, for your question, and through you, Mayor. I understand the Preston Central Business Association is planning celebrations and possibly some street decorations at this time of the year, and that would be delivered through the special rate levy. I also understand that Council has offered the use of the 421 High Street art space to decorate for Lunar New Year, as has been undertaken in previous years. And I'll now hand over to my colleague Jodie to answer the other questions.
Thank you for the questions, John. With regards to customer service, yes, you're quite correct that the customer service centres will be closed between the Christmas and New Year periods. There will be 3 business days that they will be closed for. Traditionally, this is a time of very low customer traffic, and many customers are spending the time away with family or celebrating the holidays. During this time, we will also have our call centre available, as well as a range of other self-service options available via Council's website. In response to question 3 regarding question time, Council, as you know, has recently reviewed its governance rules. We will be reviewing them again in 2023. During that time, the amended governance rules will be put out to public consultation, and there will be an opportunity for you to provide feedback around any adjustments that you would like to see to this approach with regard to question submission at that time. And just following up on your question earlier, John, prior to the meeting, apologies, it was 5:59 and we were just getting started. We can arrange a special arrangement for you to provide you with written responses to your questions. Typically, our approach is that with public question time, those that are present in the gallery receive their response verbally from officers, and we don't provide responses in writing, although they are noted in the minutes of the next meeting. But we will make arrangements for you, John, to post out responses to you in writing, and thank you for the Mayor for raising it with me.
Thank you, Jodie. I appreciate that. We have no further questions, so I'll go on to submissions. Community members may register and make a submission in relation to matters listed on tonight's agenda. This is in accordance with the governance rules. We have 4 submitters this evening. One will be called up and be brought forward prior to the relevant agenda item. The other 3 will allow to be done now as the submitters relate to confidential reports. So in accordance to our governance rules, submissions can't be made in relation to notice of motions or urgent business. So now I'd like to invite Serena O'Malley, who I understand is attending virtually tonight, to be unmuted and her camera be turned on, and you have 2 minutes to make your submissions. Thank you, Serena.
Thank you, Mayor. My name's Serena O'Mealy, just for future reference. There's a confidential item regarding Clement's Reserve on tonight's agenda. I assume this is in relation to purchasing 3 parcels of land within the park from Vic Roads. If that's the case, then there's no reason not to clearly state the matter that is being debated in the agenda. I think if you look at the agenda, you'll see what I mean. It's quite oblique as to what's under discussion. Negotiation for these 3 parcels of land have been going on for years, and I expect that a fixed settlement figure is likely to be in the agenda. If the decision on the purchase of the land is to either accept or reject a negotiated purchase price, then I believe that the matter should be debated publicly in accordance with Darebin Council's transparency obligations. This has been done in the past in relation to similar state government land disposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Serena. Because this is submission time, we do not have answers to those who make submissions. So this evening, the next submission I have is I'd like to invite Miranda Sharp, who's actually in the gallery this evening, and if you'd like to have your 2 minutes for your submission, please step up to the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. I hope my submission puts a little context around the questions that I've asked earlier. I'm the founder and director of Melbourne Farmers Markets, based at Melbourne Innovation Centre, where not only we operate Alphington Farmers Markets, but host a number of small businesses, social enterprises, charities, and significant Darebin food security projects. Every weekend, 35 small businesses trade on our site, and we employ 8 full-time staff. We work closely with a number of urban agriculture on site, including those in the gallery tonight, the Mushroomery and Sporadical City Mushrooms. I was awarded the 2019 Darebin Citizen of the Year in recognition of establishing the Community Food Hub, an honour that I'm very proud of and thankful to the City of Darebin for. And it not only is the work in the community, but also in representing many businesses and social enterprises that I'm proud that we are relevant to many of Darebin's strategies. Our licence to space expires at the end of December 22, and it's no reassurance to have it renewed verbally to 5 short months. We feel that the City of Darebin is the leaseholder on which Melbourne Innovation Centre's decisions must be based, and so therefore it's of great anxiety to us to have just that short period of time, which gives no certainty for planning or longevity. Without immediate commitment and resolution before the end of the year, Melbourne farmers markets, and therefore those on whom we host, poses significant risk of ceasing operations, including the food hub and the market, causing significant public response.
Your time's up. Can you kindly just summarise, if that's okay?
We're really hoping for a decision. I appreciate being contacted by council officers. It has been a very long and anxious 18 months, which we really believe could have and should have been handled differently, albeit I respect that our relationship is with Melbourne Innovation Centre.
Thank you
However,
very much. Your time
things
is
could have
up.
been different.
I apologise. I'd love to give as much time to everybody, but it does make it very difficult, but I need to stick to a very strict time.
Unity.
Thank you. Can I kindly invite Julia Ladle to come forward to make your submission, please? Which I believe... Is Julia in the gallery?
I think she's had to go.
Okay, so Julia's left. Can we hand that over to the officers to make that submission? But we don't know what that was. Okay, so we'll just move on to the next item. I apologise. Okay, we'll go over to item number 8, petitions. Councillors, do we have any petitions this evening? No? If not, then I'll move on to the next agenda item. Councillors, we have a number of items on our agenda this evening that we need to deal with within a time frame. I will be permitting questions of officers prior to the commencement of our debate on each item. If I think there's sufficient questioning has already occurred, I'll exercise my rights under the governance rules to submit and limit those questions, and I'll ask for the debate to commence. The first report on this evening's agenda, 9.1, the Northern Regional Trails Strategy, Summary of Consultation and Updated Strategy. We have one submitter registered to address council on this item. I now invite Caroline Lunt to come forward and make your 2-minute submission. Thank you, Caroline. Please, if you'd like to, just state your name and your suburb.
Caroline Lunt, Northcote. I'd firstly like to thank Council for acknowledging the Indigenous people, also the work you've doing with Julian Assange and the climate emergency. Now, in regard to 9.1, the Northern Regional Trail Strategy, looking at item 2.2, which states we will design and create public spaces where our people feel safe, welcome and respected, including improving lighting and safety for people walking, wheeling, cycling and driving. Darebin City Council, as I've said, acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung peoples as the traditional owners and custodians of this land. Now I ask that the Council takes up the challenge of caring for country. There's no mention of the creek environs here. It is our responsibility to care for biodiversity, including the flora, fauna and avifauna. In the Merri Creek Environs Strategy 1999, it was agreed by all stakeholders that our waterways would only have one shared footway on one side of the creek. This was to protect the species which remain. The aim was stated to function as a habitat corridor. Many species are nocturnal and so lighting will be detrimental. Cyclists and cars are responsible for the deaths of many species, which living on a shared footway I'm constantly burying. In fact, I had a dead bird today. As Yarra Council has built another trail from the Merry Trail, we now have a path on both sides of the Merry Creek where I'm living. The shared footway in Darebin was built in 1985 on a road called the Parade with no authority from the Crown. This is an example of people's needs being put first before the needs of biodiversity. Our species do not have a voice. I'm speaking for them. Please consider this in any further developments along our precious waterways. I also ask that the parade be returned as it was to a dirt track which can be used safely by pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I appreciate that. If you can resume your seat. So, councillors, are there any questions of the officers regarding this item? Councillor McCarthy, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask a question which is in part, is in part related to Carolyn Lunt's submission, and also a question that I've been sent by a community member who's also looked at this strategy and thought about it in the context of some of the current and emerging challenges. Just to give the context to the question. So the question is, do officers believe that the strategy as it is currently presented enables council to exercise flexibility in terms of the treatments that are used for different paths to enable for permeable surfaces to be replacing concrete surfaces, and also to consider permeable surfaces to be used in place of concrete surfaces, whilst also meeting council's responsibilities under the Disability Discrimination Act and other legislation?
Thank you for the question, Councillor McCarthy. Yes, so when the paths proceed to be implemented, my understanding is we will have the opportunity to consider in detail how the path is designed and constructed, taking into account its environs.
Can I kindly ask you to change microphones, if that's possible, or if we can give you a handheld microphone to ask that question, to answer that question again? I apologise, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, Councillor McCarthy. Yes, my understanding is at the time when we proceed to implementation, the opportunity around detailed design, we'll have the opportunity to consider how the paths might be constructed and their treatment and the surrounding environs that they'll be placed in.
I'll go to Councillor McCarthy. He seems to have a follow-up question, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Messina. Thank you, Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks very much, and thank you for the response as well. The second question is, for community members, including such as our question this evening and other community members that might be interested in these paths, the configuration of them, and also the risk of contravening the other strategies like the Merry Creek and Environment Strategy, will there be an opportunity for community members to provide feedback or input at that point? And at what point do the configurations of those paths come into some sort of public consultation environment so that public can have input into what is proposed? Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Councillor McCarthy. The updated strategy that we have tabled for your consideration this evening has included 2 rounds of community consultation, and a summary of that is included in the report. If decisions are made to proceed with the paths in the strategy at that time, when we develop the detailed planning, there will be an opportunity for the community for consultation in planning and shaping up the detailed path design.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Messina.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Williams, just following up on Councillor McCarthy's question, and I'm keen about, we talk about permeable surfaces, I'm keen about glowing pathways in terms of looking at recycled content to ensure safety and looking at that rather than lights, and using that a surface to ensure that there's some glowing capabilities like they do over in Europe.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Messina. when we build any infrastructure, our sustainable procurement policy guides us, and we do look for opportunities to increase circular economy content of our materials and to reduce the environmental impact. I'm not aware of that technology you've described being used in Melbourne, but happy to take that on notice and have our officers research that.
Thank you very much. Do you have any other follow-up questions, Councillor Messina? Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, Mayor, could I just ask that you speak closer to the microphone because it's hard hearing from
I apologise. I
Maybe
can
putting
certainly
the
do
microphone
that.
closer to you or something. But my question through you, Mayor, is I just want to get an understanding, just picking up from the submission that was made by Caroline Lund, is I just want to get an understanding from the report what the biodiversity impact of the trails will be. And so what consideration has been given to that, both technical consideration and also consideration by the feedback that we got from the community. And also, the second part to the question is, will there be an opportunity later on down the track, part of the pun, to pick up on biodiversity issues in the construction of the tracks?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Greco. So the paths that have been put forward for as priority in consideration of funding have had 8 criteria shape them, and one of those criterion is assessing the contribution to uniqueness and the quality of the natural environment. The detailed environmental considerations of planning and constructing a path would happen at that time. And yes, there would be an opportunity for community consultation to help shape the design and delivery of the paths.
If there were no further questions, I will now move to the debate. Oh, I have a question. Yes, Councillor Newton. No? Oh, okay. No further questions. I have Councillor Newton that would like to move the officer's recommendation. Yes, and do I have a seconder? Councillor Rennie. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Firstly, I'd just like to
I
acknowledge...
can't hear you.
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge Carolyn Lunt and also the person on who Councillor McCarthy spoke to about making sure that as Darebin we do consider biodiversity, we do consider the environment when these trails are going forward. So I think that's crucial. I think we had a really good response from the officer that when and if this does go to detailed design, those concerns will be absolutely paramount. But what we're doing tonight is we are updating a 2016 strategy about the Northern Regional Trails. So this is a framework for developing regional trails in Northern Melbourne, and we're working with other councils to do this. So ourselves, Banyule, Hume, Marybeck, Nillumbik and Whittlesea. The strategy from 2016 was really successful. It leveraged approximately $11 million of state government funding to deliver priority projects. And we have a list of 10 projects in Darebin that we really want to prioritise. And I think something that is really exciting about the 10 Darebin priorities is that 7 of them, almost 8, are in the north of Darebin. So something I hear a lot is that we need to be doing more for active transport in the north of the city. So I'm really pleased to see this. I know personally I'm an e-bike rider and I ride probably every day. I used to ride up to Darebin Creek to La Trobe University, which I absolutely loved, and now I've never really called it the Northern Pipe Trail, but I'm on St George's Road a lot as well, and I rode down here tonight, so I'm really pleased to see the priority projects, particularly in the north of our city. And I've also seen the benefits of upgrading trails and upgrading roads as well, so I'm really excited to really do as much as we can to advocate and to leverage for more state government funding. And I think as we go forward, Darebin will absolutely be concerned about the environment, the biodiversity, and how to balance the needs of people that want to use the trails, people that want to use the trails at night with animals, environment, as well as safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Newton has covered a lot of ground. I would just like to note that this is a regional strategy, and we've worked closely with other councils in the north to develop this strategy. This is very important because we all know that when you're on a bicycle or when you're walking, you don't stop your walk or your ride at a municipal boundary. These things have to be done in concert with each other and in partnership, because otherwise we end up with a situation like we've had in the past where bike paths literally stop somewhere and there are missing links. So I'm really delighted that this has come back to us with this updated form. The previous strategy was incredibly effective, and I agree that we need to make sure in moving forward that we respect the environment, biodiversity. But I would say to all councillors, there is nothing that threatens biodiversity more in Darebin and more broadly on the planet than the climate emergency. And from a transport point of view, 15% or so of Darebin's emissions come from transport. The more people we can encourage to walk or to cycle, the more we address that climate emergency issue, and that ultimately will lead to better biodiversity outcomes in our municipality. I'm excited to see what we can leverage over the next 7 years, just as we've made, or 6 years, huge progress in the last 6 years. And I hope that, in 6 years' time, we are once again updating this strategy and we're able to look back and say, we didn't just leverage $11 million worth of investment, maybe this time it'll be $15 million worth, and that this part of Melbourne could become the safest and most enjoyable and fastest place in Melbourne to get around on a bike. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. It's great for us to be considering this, and I echo the sentiments by other councillors in terms of the importance of the regional approach. And I also thank our officers for their work in being involved in this process to date and also responses to questions this evening. I think it's worth saying that when we consider what this strategy and its predecessor has done, it is actually very much in line with how we need to be thinking about all of our regional responses. So in this case, the majority of the lands that we're referring to is Wurundjeri country. It is land which has one traditional owner group, and it is really important that when we, as local governments, come together, we speak together collectively in a way that supports the traditional owners. And I say this because many of the trails that we're actually referring to relate to songlines, they relate to traditional passages of waterways, they relate to corridors that people have moved along and through over many thousands of years. And so when we think about the work that is proposed to happen here, which is either establishing, extending, supporting or reinforcing existing trails or new trails, we want to do that in such a way that is consistent with the environmental values, the social values, and of course also that respect for country that we heard about this evening. But we also need to recognise that these trails are, for some people, their touch point with our natural environment. And if we are going to give people the opportunity to engage in their natural environment in such a way that builds their appreciation and builds their protection of that natural environment, because governments cannot do it alone, I'll be really clear, community custodianship is absolutely essential, then we need to create ways for people to safely engage in these places without destroying them and without damaging them. And I think this trail strategy does that, but I think the critical detailed work is the work that comes through our chamber. This is the strategy to support that, and I think it's our responsibility to ensure that those values are expressed every time we consider a capital works piece. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you also to the officers.
Thank you. Councillor Messina, thank you.
Just very briefly, I think my councillors have said very much in detail, but I think we address the economy, we address the environment, also biodiversity, which is included in that. This is, as stated, a regional project, but we also need to look at social connection. We know, those of us that attended the Northern Council Alliances, that placemaking and social connection is going to be huge in terms of addressing our mental health. So this is the future, but it also looks at connectivity to other infrastructures, like it's important that connectivity into some of our elevated rail infrastructure that's been built. We're also looking at our education institutes like the La Trobe University. So this is about addressing connectivity, biodiversity, environment, but also social connection. I think that needs to be addressed in the chamber as well.
Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. I've got just an additional dot point that I'd like to add, which has come out of the conversation that we've just had from other councillors. And the amendment that I'd like to put forward reads as follows, that officers ramp up council's advocacy to the state government to provide additional funding to implement the strategy. So I propose that as an amendment.
I'll just ask the mover and a seconder if they accept that.
Yes.
Okay, if they do, then would that be part of the new motion then?
Can I have it?
Mayor, I haven't seen that in writing, and I'm not sure the language is of the
needs to be
nature that we
tweaked,
see
maybe?
in this. I might ask for some officer advice
Yes,
before making
I'm
a
happy to
decision.
go
Thank
over to
you.
the governance advice. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. If we could get the amended wording on screen first before we discuss it.
Councillor Greco, have you actually forwarded that amendment to our officers that could actually
I could forward
please
it
put
now,
that
yeah.
on?
Yep, if you like.
Thank you. Is it worthwhile a journey for 5 minutes?
Depends how, if it's a minor amendment, it shouldn't take long.
Is it just a minor amendment, Councillor Greco?
Yep.
Hopefully we can get up pretty quickly.
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Greco, I've removed the word officers. Council shouldn't be directing officers, and I've just put request the CEO to ramp up advocacy. Sorry, just to get it right. Happy
Is
with
that your amendment that you have that's up on the screen? Are you happy with that? Are the mover and seconder happy with that?
Yes, I am.
With the indulgence of Councillor Greco, could we put the request the CEO increase council's advocacy? Councillor Greco, would you accept?
Is this a standing?
Councillor Greco would accept that, and in light of that word change, I'll accept it as well. So it becomes the motion.
Okay, thank you. Because we've had a mover and seconder to accept that motion, that is now the substantive motion. I do have another councillor with their hands up, so I'll go over to Councillor Messina. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just a little bit curious in terms of, I understand the purpose of item number 4 and the additional amendment. I'm just a little bit curious of what that actually means. Does that mean working with the other councils to increase the advocacy strategy? Darebin City Council already has an advocacy strategy. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we delegate that to the CEO? Because it's still unclear. Does it mean that we just simply put up our hand and ask the Minister Stitt for some extra funding, or does it mean we actually advocate that in a different domain?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Messina. I'll go over to our CEO who can answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Messina. I would take that as an instruction to see if there is any further actions we can take, in addition to the actions we've already taken, to work with the Mayor, whose role it is to undertake advocacy, to see if there are any additional funding sources available we can ask for to implement the strategy. So if there's not, then I would advise the Mayor, but I would take that as an instruction to look if there are other funding opportunities we should be exploring.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Lawrence, I believe you had your hand up also.
Yes, Mayor Williams, I'd just like to speak to the substantive motion, including the addition, thank Councillor Greco for the included addition of number 4. Obviously, this is a very exciting strategy for the North and the North East.
Yeah, excuse me, Councillor Lawrence, if you don't have an amendment, can I ask you to resume your seat, because I do already have a mover and I need to ask them if they could speak to the item first.
Yep.
Thank you. So would the mover like to speak to the item?
I've already spoken.
Okay, and Councillor... Oh, but then Councillor Greco has... So Councillor Greco, because you've put in a point 4, would you like to speak to your item?
Yes, I'll speak to the overall motion now. Yeah, look, I want to thank the mover and the seconder for including this 4th point. I think it's important that that 4th point is put there because it's really about time that we see more activity, as has been mentioned by the mover, Councillor Newton, that there's more resources that are dedicated to the north of Bell Street. And here is a project where we can actually advocate a little bit more to ensure that more funds come to the north of our city, particularly around a project like this, which has been well established in the southern part of our city, and it's brought a lot of benefits to the community, and it's obviously there's an obvious extension to the north of our city and beyond. So it'll be good to attract more money and to actually realise this in a short time. The other point that needs to be made is that when you look at the various trails, they run right across, as has been mentioned, from the western side of the northern part of our city over to the eastern side of our city. And what we've been noticing in recent years is that more and more people are taking the opportunity to use these trails and these paths, either for walking or for riding their bicycles, or as a public as a transport mode to get to other parts of the city from a north-south perspective. So I look forward to the work that this will bring on, and I'm hopeful that our CEO, through the Mayor, will be able to attract more funds for this important project.
Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Lawrence, and my apologies for earlier, as you did have the right to speak.
Thanks, Mayor Williams, but I think Councillor Greco was before me. Yeah, look, this is a really exciting policy. I've spent most of my life on a few of these trails: Merry, Darebin, Plenty, River, Darebin Creek and Yarra, which are all encompassed in this motion that we're supporting other councils. So we're supporting a big, broad reconnection with nature. Coming locally, I certainly take the point of having the quiet spaces along our creekways. I look forward to greater connectivity with the pipe trails so that you can go from the top of Bundoora Park across to Edwards Park Lake with the sort of northeast, southwest trail, water trail, pipe trail, and of course the main pipe trail go all the way down to St George's Road. That's going to really allow a lot of connectivity for people. However, as we develop the Darebin Upper Trail, and we are looking forward to a new footbridge, in addition to the Rathcan one, it would be good if we maintain soft paths and informal paths or bush paths or, well, the trails that are put there by animals, wombats, kangaroos and others, on the east side of the Darebin Creek there, next to the golf course, because that's where we will preserve habitat. And the interconnectivity really needs to go on the hard paths, really need to go on the west side of Darebin Creek around that section. So it is exciting, though, if the pipe trails are upgraded so people can connect to nature much quicker with their bicycles. But I really enjoy, during the lockdown, the ability to walk in Bundoora Park with no bikes swooping around me and just being run over by the occasional mob of kangaroos.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Are there any further any further speakers? If there are no further speakers, then I will put that to vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. (9.2) Declaration of Special Charge, the Solar Saver Residential, Batch 2. Are there any questions to our officers regarding this agenda item? If there are no questions to our officers, then I would say that we're entering the debate. I do have a motion there. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor McCarthy. Councillor McCarthy, will you be moving the officer's recommendation?
I will.
Thank you. And I have a seconder, Councillor Messina. Thank you. Over to you, Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll keep this brief because we've spent a bit of time on the previous item and this is pretty straightforward. Just very pleased again to be moving a further motion to declare a special rate scheme. In this case, the special charge scheme will be supporting the installation of solar onto 14 properties, adding an additional 78.8 kilowatts of solar capacity in Darebin. The value of this is just under $100,000, which is once again a great example of the investment that this program both delivers to residents through the no interest loan scheme that we are able to provide through the rates, plus also delivering a significant investment in solar in our community, and we know the flow-on effects in terms of our own solar generation and of course our emissions reduction activity as well. So congratulations to those households, and also thank you to our officers for their really detailed work in this space.
Absolutely. Over to Councillor Messina. Thank you.
Nothing further, Mayor.
Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mayor, just briefly, I'd like to note this program, it becomes routine in this council, but I'd just like to remind everyone that Councillor McCarthy and Councillor Cetus kicked off this program. I'm trying to remember, it's at least over 10 years ago. Yeah. It might have been in the embryo even before then. In the previous term, the 2012 term. Anyway, the main thing I'd like to underscore for our community is these types of programs can be started at progressive councils, and if you wait 10 or 12 years, they might actually be adopted by state governments. So this is a very meaningful project, and we should remember the genesis of it and also the objective that we're all now seeking.
Mayor Williams, can I say a few words?
Absolutely.
I know I said I didn't. Just really briefly.
I'll allow it.
Yep.
Thank
you, Mayor Williams. I think we just have to note that there is an issue in Melbourne based on the energy, not only in Melbourne, actually in Australia, in terms of energy equity and affordability. And this is some groundbreaking that was started and instigated by Councillor McCarthy way back then. And I think we need to applaud that and continue that. And hoping, I know my own family who do not live in Darebin, and I've asked their local council to implement this, are not implementing it, and they are so far behind. So the City of Whittlesea, please take note and take this on board, please, especially when it addresses energy equity. And we've got a lot of our vulnerable in our community who are struggling. People are not turning on their air conditioners. People are not turning on their heater because they want they're using their disposable income on other things. It's pretty serious out there. So I look forward to other councils taking on board and taking on this initiative.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Do we have any further speakers? If there are no further speakers, I'll put the item to vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. (9.3) Community Engagement Policy Review. Personal Information Collection Requirement and Section 223 of 1989 Local Government Act. Do we have any questions to our officers in regards to this agenda item, councillors? Councillor Rennie, thank you.
Thank you. Do we stand for questions or just for speaking?
No, it's a question.
We do stand.
Oh, yes.
Just
yes,
couldn't
sorry.
recall.
It's a council meeting, it's formal.
Vagueness. Thank you. Look, I'm just preempting the fact that I know there's a proposed amendment, and rather than asking questions when an amendment is put up, I thought it was more helpful to tease this out now. Councillor Greco's flagged a desire to propose an amendment which would start with allowing participants involved in community engagement the option to provide their name and address. In relation to the wording of that amendment, is there anything in there that would inhibit the operation of community engagement in the way that we intend, which is that we wouldn't create any barriers? And would that be achievable, and would it undermine any intent in any way?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Rennie, and through you, Mayor. It would be, within the amendment, it would be an optional requirement for community members, or an option for them to produce or provide their personal details. We will still collect postcodes and various demographic information such as age and background, but we will actually move to an optional field for people to enter their personal details.
Thank you. Are there any further questions that councillors would like to ask our officers while they're available at this point before we start the debate? Councillor Messina, thank you.
Through you. Mayor Williams, I was going to ask about, we know we often hear from those with the loudest voices. How do we control targeted campaigns when, for example, we have a group of passionate individuals versus those who were the most, perhaps, least spoken? And how do we balance that when it comes to IP addresses and community engagement in that area, please?
Through you, Mayor Williams. Thank you, Councillor Messina, for your question. So in terms of balancing the feedback, so we will be encouraging community participation and getting a broad range of community perceptions and opinions, and looking at the qualitative data, and also doing a cleanse of the IP addresses as well, which will allow us to identify whether there's any duplication of responses. So it's really through that qualitative and looking at the different perceptions and understanding the different community voices.
Thank you. You have a follow-up question?
Yeah, thank you. How do we cleanse the IP addresses? I'm just curious.
Sure. Through you, Mayor Williams. Thank you, Councillor Messina, for your question. So we we export the data in its raw form, and then we go through and there's a field that says IP addresses, which we actually look at, and we would sort by alphabetical order or numbers, and then we go through the databases and identify the IP addresses. And so sometimes in an organisation there will be the same IP addresses where there's numerous participants who could participate, but then through the demographics information that we also collect as part of our engagements, we then identify whether there's it's the same individual or it's a different individual, and then we'll be able to cleanse it that way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Councillor McCarthy. I believe you had your hand up. No? Are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, then no. Thank you, officers. Then we can enter the debate. Thank you. Councillor Rennie, I believe you're the mover. You're moving the officer's recommendation. And do I have a seconder for that item? I had two hands at the same time.
Councillor Hannon can have it.
Councillor Hannon, thank you, as a seconder. Councillor Rennie, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really delighted that this item has come back to us after close to 2 years. 2 years ago we made a decision. I don't think it was any secret that I felt strongly that it was the wrong decision, because it was a decision that required people to leave personal information in order to participate in community consultation. That requirement was placed on all people across the municipality, whether they were children, whether they were elderly people with no access to computers, whether they were homeless people wanting to participate in a consultation about housing futures in Darebin. That requirement has placed a barrier on participation, and we know that there are people in this municipality who have not participated in our community consultations because of that barrier that was created. Removing that barrier, I think, should be the highest priority for this council, not only for us, but because it's consistent with the expectations of the Local Government Act around the way in which we consult with community members and the way in which we ensure that all members of our community are able to participate and that all voices are equally important. This change tonight will increase the number of people from communities that are sometimes marginalised and less heard, will increase their ability to participate and to have their voice heard. It will make it easier for council to go out to settings where they may find vulnerable people. That could be a community centre, it could be a rooming house, and to actually sit down and have a conversation with people without saying, what's your name, where do you live, what's your email address. I think that's really important, because those are the people who have actually missed out. I want to ensure that in the future, all consultations that are undertaken by this council respect and respond to all of the voices in our community, particularly children's voices. I think it's pretty critical. I know my own kids, about 10 years ago, were down at the local playground and council was undertaking a consultation asking people who are using that park what they'd like to see in the future. My kids were able to stand up and say, actually, I want footy goals, or I want a flying fox. And those things actually got delivered. And I think, and this was well before my time on council, but that was an extraordinary opportunity for the children in that neighbourhood to feel as though they'd had a direct influence on local government. They didn't have to leave their name, they didn't have to get parental permission, they just sat in a park and gave their ideas and drew pictures. And, that I think is the finest type of consultation, where you're actually engaging people in grassroots democracy and participation. So I urge all councillors to support this as is. I think it's a really good response, and I think it's a good recognition that we want to do more and be better in this space.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor Hannan, as you're the seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
Can I reserve my right, please?
Absolutely.
Mayor?
Are there any further councillors that would like to speak to this motion? Councillor Messina, I think, was just before you.
Sorry. Thank you. Suzanne, Councillor Newton, you can go, that's okay.
Thanks. I'll be fairly brief, so I'm rising in support of this motion as well. Similar to Councillor Rennie, I was also against this addition when we made it a couple of years ago, and I think it is worth mentioning one of the particular reasons again why I was against it 2 years ago, and it's because I've worked as a librarian, and I remember having a client come in who did not want to give her address when she registered to be a library member because of family violence. So currently we have a situation where that sort of person would not be able to participate in Darebin community engagement, and they have every right to. So what this does is take away that barrier, which we've seen over the last 2 years does create an additional barrier. The other example I thought of was my mum, who I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying, she's not great with technology, so she's not always sure when something is a scam or when something is legitimate. So she would not always be comfortable giving her personal details either. So I think that's just a couple of examples why this officer recommendation makes a lot of sense. And the one thing that I think we should also mention that's happened recently is the cyber attacks. So we want to be really, really careful with people's personal information. I know that my driver's licence was found in the Optus breach as well as Medibank, so I think many, many community members will have experienced that as well. So everything we can do to make sure people's data is protected, I think we should do.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Councillor Messina, thank you.
Through you, Mayor. We did read some of the reports where there were some barriers in terms of community engagement, in terms of receiving that information, because people did not want to give their names and postcodes and addresses. The highest priority of this council is regarding community engagement is to ensure that all voices are heard, not just the loudest voices. That's why I asked about IP cleansing previously. And it's important that this council listens to the whole of the community and not just orchestrated, targeted campaigns. Yes, we need to listen to children. The children's voices are important, but we also need to ensure that it's not the children that have been led by others to have their voice said in this particular chamber. Remember, it's not just the loudest voices, but it's also the vulnerable voices that we need to continue engaging. So I look forward to further reports coming to this chamber and council at briefings that shows that the whole of the community has had a voice and the whole of the community has participated, not just orchestrated campaign that would lead to one particular direction or not.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Councillor Greco, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. I have an amendment that I'd like to put forward.
Has that amendment been circulated, Councillor
Yes, it's been
Greco?
circulated. And
to officers and to councillors?
Yes,
Thank
Mayor
you.
Williams.
Okay, I'll give a moment for you to read your amendment and for councillors to read over that. And if you can kindly confirm if that's your correct amendment.
That's my amendment, yes.
Thank you. Is that given councillors enough time to read it?
Excuse me, sorry, Mayor, sorry. Can we please have the strikeout of what was in the original officer's recommendation and then the adjustments, please, like we have been having, if that's
Is it possible that officers can actually bring that up so councillors can see what the difference is between the original officer's recommendation and Councillor Greco's amendment? Thank you. Me. Oh. Read that.
The original's down the bottom.
So the original is actually down the bottom. Can we do maybe a colour change or just a notification that that is Councillor Greco's motion? So it's not just councillors that are understanding that what the change is, but obviously those who are watching online. I believe that is now Councillor Greco's amendment. Is that correct, Councillor Greco?
Yes. Continue to collect postcodes and demographic information usually collected.
Is that a question? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask questions at the moment. I think I need to... unless it's an amendment.
Well, oh no, I was going to.
I just need to ask our mover.
I was going to foreshadow. I'll second the amendment.
Okay, I have Councillor Rennie, who's the mover, and Councillor Hannon, who's the seconder. I need to ask if they accept Councillor Greco's.
No.
Councillor Rennie is the mover, does not accept your amendment, and Councillor Hannon? No. Because you have moved an amendment, I need to ask, do we have a seconder for your amendment? Councillor Lawrence.
I have a question.
Oh, apologies,
Sorry,
Councillor Messina.
Sorry, Mayor. And I don't know if it was answered previously, but allows participants involved in community engagement the option. Does that mean that if a participant was doing that online, it would say option only and will continue to collect postcodes? Is that what? Because it's pretty broad, so I'd like to see how that was
Thank you.
managed.
I'll ask our CEO to answer that if that's possible. Thank you.
I might ask SJ, or can you answer that question for Councillor Messina, please?
Sure. Sorry, could you please repeat that question again?
My question is, I'm assuming that the amendment officer's the amendment that's put forward by Councillor Greco and seconded by Councillor Lawrence indicates that allowing participants involved in community engagement the option. Does that mean if somebody's doing that online, it'll be asterisk option only? So it's given, so you don't have to do it. It's provided there, but it can be filled in by the participant, yes or no.
Sure. Through you, Mayor Williams. Thank you, Councillor, for your question. So the way it will probably be done online is if it's in a survey, the questions will be asked first, and then as part of just before the demographics questions, we'll probably ask that question if, in terms of that, how it will be put together. Either the personal information will come before the demographics or it will be asked after the demographic information, but it won't be there won't be any questions which we currently do have that asks about whether participants are okay to provide personal information to then be able to provide feedback. So it'll be a slightly different format in the case of a survey, but in other engagement tools that we use, it will just be an optional.
I have a supplementary question. In relation to postcodes received during surveys, is that something that is willingly given by a participant?
Postcodes are usually willingly given by participants, yes.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Yep. Councillor McCarthy.
Sorry, to the officers, I've got another question, if I can. Sorry, and I just need to understand how this is going to be interpreted. So I'm just wanting to understand if the amendment is adopted as part of the motion, am I correct to understand that in terms of interpreting point 1, I just want to test my interpretation is correct, that it doesn't remove the requirement for participants to provide their name, email, postal address and postcode, but gives them the option to provide their name and address. So my reading of that is that it would still be a requirement for people to provide their postcode at the very minimum, because there's not the removal of the requirement. So I'm just wanting to understand if my interpretation of that is correct, because we're about to vote on this, and I'm interested in how officers are going to interpret the motion, if I can. And I'm sorry it's a confusing question, but it's a confusing statement that's been written there, so I'm trying to make sure we're right.
Yeah, sure, thank you.
Through you, Mayor Williams. Councillor McCarthy, we're doing our best to support Council. This is the first time that the three of us have seen these words in this way when it was presented on the screen tonight. So we're just processing and making sure that we can give you our best advice. I'll hand over to SJ now.
Thanks, Jodie. Through you, Mayor Williams. Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. So just sort of reading from what the proposed amendment states, it seems that it will be a question that is asked as part of the engagement, but there will be no mandatory, it wouldn't be a mandatory thing for any participant to provide the provide their information, but it will be asked as part of engagements. And from what it's written, it seems like it's all engagements that we do, that we will be including those questions.
Thank you. I'll get our CEO who would like to also
John,
give some feedback.
Councillor, through you, Mayor, I think Councillor McCarthy, looking at the original motion, which removed the requirement in part 1 to collect postcodes, and then part 2 said we will collect postcodes. I think there was a inherent consistency in the original motion. I think the question is, just very clearly, under this amendment, are we collecting postcodes or not under this amendment is probably the question, and then the original motion probably needs a minor amendment to clarify that too when it comes back, just to be clear.
Because of that, maybe it might be worthwhile taking an adjournment for 5-10 minutes, if that's okay. It's probably appropriate timing for those to go and have a drink or a toilet. So I'll just to let viewers know that we'll be having a break for 10 minutes and we'll be back online at 7:46. Thank you. I believe that during that break we've had discussions, and Councillor Greco, I'll hand that over to you at this point in time, as I believe that there's been some changes.
Okay, maybe if we could put the wording up through our
So
office.
maybe you might explain a little bit to those who are online exactly where we landed prior to the break and where we're going.
Okay, originally we had this as the amendment, what you see up in the screen. The issues have been around point number 1 and its clarity. We've workshopped with officers to provide slightly different wording that clarifies what the actual intent is and what we need to do to the policy to ensure that that intent is reflected in the policy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Do our officers have the new wording? So, Councillor Greco, that is your new amendment. Is that correct?
Yes.
As Councillor Lawrence, you were the seconder to Councillor Greco's amendment. Do you accept that?
For the sake of progressing this matter, I'll second that with apologies to English teachers in advance.
Okay, thank you. As the mover, Councillor Rennie, and I have Councillor Hannon as the mover and seconder. Do I have an acceptance for Councillor Greco's?
No, I don't accept that, but we already have a mover and a seconder, so my acceptance is moot. I think we're debating it.
Okay, because we have a mover and a seconder for the amendment, I'll go over to the mover, Councillor Greco, if you'd like to speak on your amendment.
Okay, and thank you.
And you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Williams. Look, the reason why I'm moving this amendment is basically to make it optional for that 20%, as it's been verified, that are not prepared to give their name and address in our consultation process. Mind you, we're talking about 20% of the community. We're not talking about 80% of the community or 90% of the community, only 20% of the community that is not willing to give their name and address. I think it's important that we provide that as an option. If it is a barrier for that 20%, that small margin of people, then what this motion does, what this amendment does, it provides that 20%, again I stress 20%, an option of providing their address and their name and those particular details. Why is this amendment important? Councillors, it's important because the integrity of the feedback that we get is crucial to our policy making process. As Councillor Messina said earlier, we have targeted campaigns. I don't think per se there's anything wrong with targeted campaigns. They can be, and that's part of the political process. But if we are to have targeted campaigns, we should at least know that those targeted campaigns are in some sort of way that we know where that campaign is coming from, whether it's coming locally or is coming from outside our area, because it actually can contaminate the information that we get as a council, and then in terms of the policies that we developed. And look, at my 14 years here on council, I've seen attempts where there have been targeted campaigns in order to sway the council in the consultation process towards a particular end, and where the silent voices, the vulnerable voices, don't get a proper hearing. Also, the point was made about that the vulnerable, making this connection between giving your name and not giving your name with vulnerable communities. I think the opposite is true, councillors. It's usually the ones that don't want to give their names are usually the more articulate, are the ones that are usually want to have an impact on policy because they want to either orchestrate a campaign, and that again taints the integrity of the data that we get. And then the other point that I think we need to take into account is the credibility of the information that comes before us. And just finally, I say, a lot has been mentioned about the cyber attacks and things like that. I think it's a furphy as an argument, because council collects a lot of detailed information from its residents, name, address, and lots of details. So this is not the only place where we collect that information. We already have that information. So if we were to be vulnerable, we are currently vulnerable to cyber attacks.
Thank you. As a seconder, Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Williams. Look, this is a very serious issue, and I was happy that councillors want to take the time to debate the fine parts of it. I'm assuming as optional only will be interpreted as an optional choice only, but anyway, we're not talking about grammar here. We're talking about the mechanics, and a motion needs to be clear on its mechanics so that officers can implement it. And what is clear is that all information that we have currently, which is up to 70% of the population, is rates-based information. We are guardians of that. That is something that we have to take seriously in the new environment, and it's a very new environment of data insecurity. However, we also have to balance to remove barriers for participation so we get the most voices possible and the unheard voices. A lot of them will not be online. So this motion still doesn't address that. But a lot of participants will be online, and so if we can remove any barriers in terms of privacy concerns, which are now heightened, that will increase our online participation as far as online participation goes. In terms of the homeless, some of them will be willing to identify themselves just by postcode, but we really need extra outreach to hear the homeless, and that's something we need to do outside this motion.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers for the amendment or against the amendment? Councillor McCarthy. So is anybody for the amendment?
Can I just get clarity, Mayor? I thought the word only should have appeared before the word provide, to be explicit about what the minimum requirement is. Can I just clarify whether that's supposed to have been there, the word only, before the word provide in point 2?
So the last word in that number 1 sentence, only, and Councillor McCarthy saying that should be in front of...
No, sorry, leave one as it is. It's either the word only goes before, so only requires participants to provide, or requires participants to only provide. Either way, it's specifying that the only requirement that's the minimum requirement is the provision of a postcode. So otherwise it can be misinterpreted, and I think we need to be very clear about our language because we're getting last-minute amendments here.
Okay, just before I go to you, Councillor Messina, can I just go to our CEO, please?
Through you, Mayor, Councillor McCarthy, you might ask the mover and seconder to just insert that word only in the second line before provide as a minor amendment to their amendment.
That's what I'll do then, thanks.
Councillor Greco and Councillor Lawrence, do you accept that minor amendment?
For clarity, it's 2 would read, require participants to only provide postcodes.
So the mover has
Yes,
accepted
that,
and the seconder has
clarifies
accepted.
the point more. That's excellent.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other speakers for the amendment? And now do we have any...
Sorry, Councillor. Sorry, Mayor Williams. I did have a question. I did put my hand up. Excuse me.
Yep, I'll go over to you, Councillor Messina, to ask your question. Thank you.
Changing that word to only now to collect is a different direction to what I think I understood the intent was. What is the difference between number 1 and number 2? If we're saying optional only to give the names and addresses, and then 3 requires participants to only provide postcodes. I don't understand the difference when there's options anyway. So why isn't the first already in the second? Yeah.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, I think it's the problem with the grammar in 1, as Councillor Lawrence has already pointed out. I think 1 should probably read, change the policy to allow participants involved in community engagement to provide their name, email and postal address as an option only. And then 2 makes sense, and 2 says therefore that the mandatory or minimum requirement requires participants to only provide as a minimum requirement, only provide postcodes alongside the demographic information usually collected. So 2 says that's the mandatory requirement or the minimum requirement. 1, if we get the grammar right, but Councillor Lawrence was happy with the grammar, with apologies to English teachers, it suggests that that's just an option only.
Thank you.
Now that we've had all councillors who wanted to speak for it, now do I have any councillors who want to speak against it? I'll go over to Councillor Hannan, who had his hand up first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. I think there are 2 important principles here. 1 is to encourage as broad participation as possible, and 2 is to provide valid data and minimise distortion. And I think we'd probably agree on those principles, but there are different ways of going about it. We now have advice that the current requirement to collect personal information has created a significant barrier to communication, participation by community. 20% is not a small margin. And this is not just those who started a survey, that's just those who started a survey and didn't complete it, let alone potentially many more who heard by word of mouth that it was not easy to complete or didn't hear about it at all. And in the report, we're told that this specifically is an issue for people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. And we've been informed there are numerous examples where the COLD community groups have declined requests for personal information. The requirement to mandate personal information has created risks of cyber attacks for council. This is not a hypothetical thing. We've seen some very serious recent breaches at Optus and Medibank, which have sophisticated data systems in place. Under privacy legislation, there needs to be a clear need why council collects and retains personal information. And bear in mind, we're not just collecting this from ratepayers, we're actually substantially increasing the pool of people that we're collecting information from, including renters and anyone else who wants to contribute. I'll need to be brief here, but I guess my point is that we need to take advice, specialist advice from people who actually work in communications engagement, people who actually work in IT and legal risks about the recommended way to do this and to have clarity in what is required. This has not been workshopped with staff other than over the last 10 minutes. It's not the staff recommendation, and we need to follow the recommended way forward on this. Thanks.
Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. I'm very concerned that we mucked up this policy 21 months ago by putting in place a requirement which has placed a barrier to access to consultation in front of many community members. It's been suggested 20% isn't a lot, but that means that if 100,000 people in Darebin participated in some form of consultation over the last year, there's 20,000 in fact who missed out. That's a huge number. And you know, I haven't heard anyone here say that if people really want to provide their name and email address, they shouldn't be allowed to. And in fact, the officers had provided an alternate motion, which has been emailed to us, which did provide some words for that. And that I could have supported. But I think front and centre of this motion, before this amendment was suggested, was that we were removing the requirement for community engagement participants to provide their name and email or postal address. If we lose that, then we're fundamentally misunderstanding the intent of what we're trying to do here, which is to bring our policy in line with the requirements of the Local Government Act to enhance participation and community engagement across the whole community. If we choose to offer people the option to provide names and email or postal addresses, that's fine, we can do that. But there's an attempt here, I think, to try and subvert the intention, which is to make participation easier. We've heard that it's not enhanced our community engagement practices at all, it's detracted from them, and I think we need to listen to the advice, and the people who have had to work with what we gave them, which was an unworkable policy 21 months ago. It's made their lives very difficult, and it's made our community's lives difficult, and it's time to actually reverse that.
Thank you. Are there any further councillors? Councillor Newton, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. I'm speaking against this as well. So I've heard from people who are in support of this amendment that they want to remove barriers to participation. So the original recommended motion does that, and it does it really clearly. The other thing that is really important about this motion is reducing the risk of data breaches. So the less information that we have that can be discovered in a data breach, the better. So I suppose if I think about what this could mean is that maybe kids want to participate, they might be walking past a stall and they might be asked something about Darebin. If they're asked, what's your name, what's your email address, what's your postal address, etc., and they have to do that even if it's optional, I think that could be a barrier. The other obvious example is homeless people who may not have an address to list. So for me, I think I'm against this now. I suppose it's an alternative recommendation, and I think that we should go with the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Demetriadis is next, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Messina. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm rising in support of this amendment for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's that it's an option to provide your name or email address or postal address. So it's an option, which means if you'd like, you opt in and you provide it. Now, the reason we changed this policy in the first place is because we were previously receiving what appeared to be duplication of submissions in consultations, which skewed some of the results, which was coming through to council and then affected our policy making. So we came up with this idea to try and prevent that duplication. The comment that was made by a couple of councillors that it was the wrong decision 2 years ago, I completely disagree, because at the time we weren't examining IP addresses.
Can I just ask you to put your volume a little bit down?
Yes, so at the time 2 years ago, before we made this amendment, we weren't examining IP addresses for duplication or for targeted or orchestrated campaigns that we kind of seem to be seeing come through to us as results in consultation processes. So I'll be definitely supporting this amendment because it's an option, it caters for everyone. It will be encouraging broad participation, but also safeguarding against external groups anonymously flooding our consultations. To engage, some councillors have spoken about CALD communities and engaging minority groups. Speaking to a lot of experts in that area, to engage those community groups, we actually have to go out and speak to them directly. They don't normally come and engage on social media platforms. So I believe we need to do more work on that. As Councillor Lawrence said, this is only for computer online submissions, but in terms of engaging our CALD and minority groups, we need to be out there speaking to them directly, particularly when they have troubles using computers. And in terms of children, I'm sorry, some children have to be, this issue has to be really regulated. We can't...
Your time's up. Thank you, Councillor Demetriadis.
I'm really concerned about that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Messina.
Thank you. I thank you to my colleagues who've spoken about this. I'm going to be supporting it. I have thought about it. First and foremost, communication is the response you get. If I look at option 1, it says option only. If I look at option 2, it says please provide postcodes. we should be asking for postcodes. We did have some campaigns, orchestrated campaigns, where we did hear from people overseas, not just the occasional person that lives in Darebin, but people overseas that had nothing to do with the issue at hand. I guess it's how you ask the question when you engage in community engagement. Are you asking in person? If you're going to ask in person, you don't say, "Can I have your name and address?" You're going to say, would you like to include your name and address? And also, when you're looking online, it'll be an option only. It'll be the end of collecting the demographic data. So to me, that safeguards to ensure that we get quality information coming through from our community, having the way that you ask in person, where it's perhaps not a demand, but perhaps a suggestion, and asking online perhaps if it's collecting the information that states that it's option only. So I'll be in supportive of this amendment by Councillor Greco.
Are there any further councillors that would like to speak against? Okay, so I'm going to put the item to vote. We're only voting on the amendment, which is Councillor Greco's amendment to vote. If it's voted and carried, it will now then be the new substantive motion. All those in favour? I have Councillor Messina, Councillor Demetriadis, Councillor Greco, Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Williams. That motion...
Councillor McCarthy too.
Oh, I apologise, I didn't see that your hand was right up. And Councillor McCarthy. That item is now being carried, and that is the new substantive motion. Therefore, do we have any, because that is the new substantive motion, do I have any other councillors that would like to do any other amendments in reference to this item? Councillor Newton?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Williams. What I would like to do is at the end of line 1, I would like to add back the sentence, removes the requirement for community engagement participants to provide their name, email, postal addresses and postcodes.
Mayor, as the mover, I'll accept that if we remove postcode from the end.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yep.
Could I just understand, through you, Mayor, the nature of that amendment? Because the nature of that amendment may go contrary to what we've actually just passed as an amendment now. So I think it contravenes the rules in our
Thank you,
governance
Councillor
rules.
Greco. I'll just get some advice from our governance person and our CEO.
I don't think it's contrary.
It's not on the screen correctly, so...
Apologies for those who are watching online, that we're just going to do a slight amendment and see how that looks online. Sorry, up on our screen.
Removes the mandatory requirement for these details to be collected.
That's fine.
We'll get this right. Through you, Mayor, I think, can I just check if
Sure.
Councillor Newton was a mover or seconder of the original motion?
No.
I just checked that.
Councillor Rennie was, and Councillor Hannam was the seconder.
So Councillor Rennie can move, Councillor Newton can move this amendment, not
Correct.
Councillor Rennie.
Correct.
So Councillor Newton, is there an amendment you'd like to move?
Yes, this is the amendment. Oh, sorry. Yes, this is the amendment I'd like to move. So I'll just read it out for the benefit of the audience. So it now says that Council changes the policy to allow participants involved in community engagement, participants to provide their name, email, postal addresses as optional only, and removes the requirement for these details to be collected. So it's clearer.
Through you, Mayor, to answer Councillor Greco's question before you accept that or it's seconded, I don't believe that's contrary. It just says, it states the obvious, but it is not contrary.
I have a question.
Okay, I'll go over to questions. Councillor Greco.
My question is in relation to the section involved, removes the requirement for these details to be collected. That is in clear contradiction to the first two lines of that very clause. So I don't know how officers are going to be able to interpret that in terms of in an operational manner. Some light could be put on that. I'll be all ears to hear about it.
Can I suggest the addition of the word mandatory requirement, mandatory in front of requirement, would make that clearer.
Thank you. Can we just give the message? Through you, Councillor, through you, Mayor, Councillor Newton, is that what you'd like to move?
Yes, and I think that's clear.
And through you, Mayor, Councillor Greco, I don't believe that is contradictory. The first part of part one clearly says that's it as an option only, and the second part of that sentence confirms it's optional by saying it's removing the mandatory requirement. So whilst it's probably overstating the obvious, I don't think it's contradictory as an amendment.
Hang on, Councillor Lawrence, I apologise.
We might need to take some other questions, and Mayor?
Okay, I'll go over to Councillor Messina, then I'll go to Councillor Lawrence, then I'll go to Councillor McCarthy. Councillor
Thank you,
Messina,
Mayor
thank
Williams.
you.
I'm a little confused. How can we say something is optional only and then say, oh, it removes a mandatory requirement? My understanding from the officers were that we were going to, through the survey, which is going to be online, we were then going to have an option only highlighted perhaps in red that says option only for you to complete that. So how are we saying it's mandatory? We're not stating it's mandatory at all. So I'm a little confused.
Through you, Mayor, to answer Councillor Messina's question, we're not saying it's mandatory. The sentence begins with changes the policy. That refers to the existing policy. In the existing policy, it's mandatory that details are collected. So the sentence begins with change the policy to allow participants involved in community engagement. Can you remove that second word? Can you remove that bold participants? I think that should be struck out. To provide their name. So we're changing the current policy, that's the direction to the administration, to allow participants to provide their name, email and postal address as an option. And also changing the policy to remove the current mandatory requirements for these details to be collected. We haven't got the word current in, but because it's about changing the current policy.
Thank you for that clarity, because it was a little bit confusing over here.
Councillor Lawrence, over to you, and then I'll go to Councillor McCarthy. Is it a question?
I've got a question because...
Okay, can I kindly go to a seconder regarding Councillor Newton's amendment?
We won't need a seconder if the seconder of the initial motion accepts it.
Yes, which you did.
No, I'm the mover, so we have to see if Councillor Hannan accepts the amendment.
Okay. I had Councillor Rennie down as the original mover.
No, it was Councillor Hannan.
Let's get second and then we'll take questions.
I had
Councillor
you
Hannan.
as mover and Councillor Hannan as seconder. Oh, apologies. Okay.
Through you, Mayor. We have a new substantive motion that was moved by Councillor Greco, second by Councillor Lawrence.
Councillor Lawrence.
So the mover and seconder of the substantive motion
Should be given to Councillor Greco and Councillor Lawrence.
No, that's incorrect.
Beg your pardon?
I believe that's incorrect. I remain the mover of the motion.
That was the original, and then
Councillor Greco and Councillor Lawrence.
Through you, Mayor, can I ask councillors just to not argue through the mic with the Mayor? Can I suggest we just adjourn for a minute and just get just a quick minute, or we don't need to adjourn, just give you some quick advice, and then we're happy to answer councillors' questions.
Okay.
Well, you have to stop the live streaming. You have to stop.
Can you kindly resume your seat? So the original... Okay. Thank you. So the original agenda item was moved by Councillor Rennie and seconded by Councillor Hannan. Then we had an amendment which went to Councillor Greco, who made the amendment as the mover, and Councillor Lawrence was the seconder. We voted on that, and that became the new substantive motion. Then we had Councillor Newton, who's just asked to put in a amendment, and now that we need a seconder, however, that seconder cannot be Councillor Rennie or Councillor Hannan if you are to get a seconder for this item. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Chairperson. If the new substantive motion is Councillor Greco and Councillor Lawrence accept Councillor Newton's amendment.
I'm very sorry, I will call a point of order on the interpretation of the governance local law. In 6 years on council, that's never been the way this has worked, never. Every minute.
Okay, you have a point of order. Can I kindly ask that your point of order and what procedure that you're raising in your point?
It's 10.1, it's contrary to the rules of the meeting.
And which item?
The one about being contrary to the rules.
So, through you, Mayor, I think we'll ask the Manager of Governance to explain the rules which exact rule sits behind your recent comment, so that Councillor Rennie's question is answered, and then you can
make a decision.
Rule if that's correct or not.
Okay. Thank you. Over to you. So we're just allowing our governance person to clearly go through the rules, and then she will read them out. So I'm going to ask our councillors that we're going to have another 10-minute break and we'll come back at 8:33, please, so that we can actually go through this properly. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate those who have been waiting. I believe that we have another amendment. A procedural motion to Councillor McCarthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for giving me the call. I'd like to move a procedural motion that we defer this item to the council meeting to be held on the 27th of February.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder for that item? Councillor Demetriadis. Because it's a procedural motion, I will take that straight to the vote. All those in favour? That's been carried unanimously. Thank you. (9.4) Public Interest Disclosure Policy. Are there any questions to our officers on this item? Any questions? If we have no questions, then we can enter straight into the debate. Do I have a mover for the item? Councillor Newton, will you be moving the officer's recommendation? Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that item? Councillor McCarthy. Thank you. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. So this is a public interest disclosure policy that we are reviewing, and it's about disclosures regarding the improper conduct of council, councillors or council employees, and we're putting forward this policy to make sure that we meet the principles and objectives of the Local Government Act, including about integrity, encouraging staff to report improper conduct, provide support and protection to those making disclosures, and ensure the policy and practices for management have procedural fairness and natural justice to all involved. So this is something that we have had originally before, which is now due for review. And I think this is quite important to have this out in the public for transparency, and it gives clarity to how to disclose if you have seen conduct that is improper. That's it.
Excellent, thank you. Would the seconder like to speak?
Reserve my right, Mayor.
Okay. Do I have any other councillors that would like to speak to the item? Okay, there's no other councillors. Do I have any councillors who would like to speak against the item? Councillor McCarthy, because you reserved your rights, would you like to speak?
Happy for it to go to the vote, Mayor.
Thank you. Because we have no further speakers, I'd like to put that item to vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Over to 9.5, Councillors' Media and Social Media Policy, Councillor Occupational Health and Safety Policy, and Councillor Interaction Protocol. Are there any questions to our officers regarding this item? If there are no questions to our officers, then I will... Councillor McCarthy, do you have a question?
No question, Mayor. Sorry, I was about to move a motion.
Okay. So if we don't have any questions, then I would like to... do I have a motion for the item? Thank you, Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move the motion as listed with the fourth point, which was circulated to councillors and officers earlier.
Okay, can our officers kindly please get that up on our screen so we can have a quick look at that? And if you can kindly confirm if that's your amendment.
You need to tell them what the dot 4 point is, because I haven't put it in.
Yeah, I've got it here if that assists the officers. Yep. Mayor, if it's helpful, I can just tell you what the fourth point is, which was circulated earlier today.
Is it just an extra point?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, if you can read out your extra point, and I'll write it down.
Sure, here we go.
Receives a report 6 months to consider. Cancel progress.
What do you mean about progress?
That's correct.
Is that your amendment? Yes. Okay, Councillor McCarthy. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Newton, thank you. Councillor McCarthy, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep it brief because councillors have had a bit of time to consider these matters and understand the context. I want to just highlight, just for everyone here though, the proposal here is to adopt and commit to the social media and media policy, which builds on the existing policy that we have. Also to commit and adopt the Councillor Occupational Health and Safety Policy as attached, and also the Councillor Interaction Protocol. Each of these items has, at their very basis, the orderly functioning of the organisation, the protection of the organisation, the upholding of, I think, what is fair to say, the role and responsibility of councillors in relation to commentary in both social media and media. And we know that this is a complex environment with lots of demands and, of course, opportunities and risks as well for things to not go necessarily the way that we planned. So this provides clear guidance and a clear policy framework for councillors in relation to how to conduct themselves, how to respond to media inquiries. And that's in relation to the first one. In the second one, really the significant responsibility we have in relation to OH&S that carries through to everyone in the organisation, but councillors have a role there as well. And importantly, how councillors interact with each other and with council staff and the organisation relates to both of those items too. So Mayor, I endorse the new policies and protocol as listed. The suggestion to bring this back to us in 6 months' time is really that this is a rapidly evolving space. It's important for us to have a check-in point in 6 months' time to see if we've got it right, and if there's any need to review anything, there's an opportunity for us to do that at that point in time. It is a requirement under the legislation that Council has protocols and policies to govern these matters, and in this case, this provides a really important update to the work that we already have in place. I'll end it there, Mayor, other than just to thank councillors for their contributions and, of course, our officers for their drafting of these.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Not a lot to add. I think just that I really respect that we do have this out in the public about exactly how councillors should interact with staff, how councillors should interact with other councillors. And I really like that there's a very strong OH&S requirement here that very clearly indicates our responsibilities and staff and CEO responsibilities to provide a safe workplace for everyone at Darebin. And I hope that we can all really live up to the requirements of this policy.
Thank you. Do I have any further councillors that would like to speak to the item? Councillor Greco.
Thanks, Mayor Williams. I have an amendment in relation to number 1, and it's been circulated. And I'm
to both officers and councillors?
Yes, and I'm hoping that the officers can put that amendment up on the screen.
Okay, if we can kindly get that up on the screen. Thank you. Can you confirm if that's your amendment, Councillor Greco?
What page is that on?
Just in relation to the 4th dot point where it says at point 12, replace the word must with should. Instead of should, may, with the word may.
Anybody know what page that's on?
Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Demetriadis. I need to ask for the mover, which is Councillor McCarthy, and the seconder. Do they accept Councillor Greco's amendment?
No, I don't, Mayor.
No?
No.
No. Because your amendment has not been accepted, I need to ask to have a seconder for your amendment.
Councillor Demetriadis.
Oh, Councillor Demetriadis. Councillor Greco, you have 3 minutes to speak on your amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Look, I'm moving this amendment just in relation to the Appendix A, which deals with the council of media and social media policy. Reading the policy very, very carefully, I've come across some points which I believe actually limit the freedom of political communication, and also about government and to speak on government and political matters. And not to be too philosophical about this, but it is a constitutional freedom. It's implied in the Constitution where you can make political statements. But more to the point also, and this is the context of it, is that the Human Rights Charter, the Victorian Human Rights Charter, explicitly says that people, including councillors, have the right to make political statements. So the amendments, therefore, that I am making is that in relation to those points there, if you look at dot point number 2, it's to remove the word criticism, which essentially says that because what the policy is saying now is that we cannot offer a critique or be critical of council policy or council decisions. That, I believe, is an infringement on political discourse, given that we're a political organ. We're not a board. I've repeated this many times. We are a political body. Why? Because we are an act of parliament that creates councils through a representative democracy. As a result of that, it's in the nature of our role of being a political body. Also, point 11, again, to remove the word criticism, that again, about critiquing council policy and decision making. And also then if you look at the fourth dot point, replace the word with must and may, and the words as courtesy. That relates to when councillors are approached by the media. Councillors should have the right to express their views as an individual councillor, not representing the council, and there should not be a requirement where you must consult or inform the mayor. It's only right to inform the others as a matter of courtesy. It should not be an obligation in relation to that. And then also in the other point there about the delivery of services, we should be able to speak about delivery of services. Most of the things that we talk about is about the delivery of services. And finally, about contact and communication, the point B, that relates to I've run out of time.
Thank you. As a seconder, Councillor Demetriadis, would you like to speak to the amendment?
I'll reserve my right, thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other councillors that would like to speak to the amendment?
Are we past questions?
I'll allow it. Councillor Lawrence.
Mayor Williams, could I just have because there's a number of dot point 3s, etc., in this document. The removing of point 3 in roles and responsibilities, can I be clear about what that is?
Sure, I'll hand that over to the CEO. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, point 3 says any or all contact from the media to individual councillors will be immediately referred to the Mayor and/or the Communications, Engagement and Customer Experience Department ahead of any response.
Thank you for that information.
Councillor Demetriadis, is that a question or? Yep.
I have a question in regards to the social media policy that we are going to potentially accept today. Has it been reviewed or has the charter been taken into consideration on review of this policy or factored into?
I'll have our Jodie Watson and one of our officers to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Demetriadis. As advised to councillors earlier today, the development and review of the media and social media policy was not subject to an assessment in accordance with the Charter of Human Rights. That being said, other policies have been, like the community engagement policy, but not this particular one.
Are there any further questions? Okay, councillors. Any other councillors that would like to speak to the amendment? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. I'd like to just address the amendment and support the amendment. I appreciate the fact that, if I'm correct, it hasn't been through the filter of the Victorian Charter of Human Rights. But I'm also mindful of the timeliness that we do move on updating this item. I believe Councillor Greco has protected a number of freedoms and democratic principles that our residents would expect from our council. They expect answers, and the use of the word criticism is too much of a blanket term. I think the thing that we should be open to is factual criticism at any point in time. So I'm happy to support Councillor Greco's amendments on this tonight.
Do we have any other speakers for the amendment? For the amendment?
I haven't decided which way I'm going to vote yet, so I don't know if I'm for or against. So I've got.
Okay, I'm just asking for. So anybody against the motion? Did you want to speak?
Yeah, I haven't decided which way I'm going to vote yet. So I'm.
But did you want to speak
Yes,
to the?
yes, I'm
go
willing
ahead.
to hear the debate.
Councillor Messina.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the word criticism is a bit vague, and there's commentary and there's a difference between criticism. I've seen lots of criticisms by various councillors, by various municipalities, so I'm not happy with removing the word criticism, but I think a council has a right to speak to the media if they wish to express a view. So part of this amendment I'm not willing to support, but some of it I am.
Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. So I'm speaking against the amendment. So I just had a look at which points are wanting to be removed. And for example, the first one talks about that any contact from the media from individual councils will be referred to the Mayor and the comms team. I think that's really a reasonable way to do it. So we're a big organisation and the Mayor is delegated to be the spokesperson for council. So, for example, I was contacted about the Preston state election, and so one of the first things I did was contact, at that point, Mayor Messina, just to let her know and let the communications team know that I had been contacted. I think it's a really reasonable way to go about things, so I don't see any reason to remove that. And I think if we look at what 10 is, and I'll just use these two examples, what it's talking about is saying that councils must ensure that any such comment is devoid of content that could be reasonably construed as being criticism, derogatory, offensive or insulting to any person, including a member of council staff. So I think we have a real responsibility to debate fairly, and we have a responsibility that if we do have criticism of council staff, that's something we refer to the CEO. So my reading of the policy is that the requests are really reasonable, which is why I'm against this amendment.
Thank you. Any other councillors that would like to speak to the item or against the item? Thank you, Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. I confess I'm dumbfounded that on an evening where we've had one councillor who's had to make a public apology for breaching standards, and with a municipal monitor in the room, we have an amendment that's proposing to weaken our social media policy and allow, for example, criticism of staff in the public domain. We know that when we criticise staff in the public...
Point of order, if I may.
I have to address the point of order.
Yep.
So under...
Point of order, it's about... is G is a misleading or false statement.
Are you able to give a brief explanation as to
Yeah,
why?
in all that I've said, and what the point refers to is not about making criticisms in relation to staff. I have not mentioned that whatsoever, And to imply that is
Okay,
quite misleading.
thank you, Councillor Greco.
Can I ask that that statement be retracted?
Can you resume your seat? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Newton was.
I'm in a position that I am now going to ask for a procedural motion to have this item also adjourned until the next council meeting, which will be the 27th of February. Can I have somebody please? I had Councillor Lawrence had his hand up first, and then I had Councillor Rennie.
Mayor, I wonder if we could just adjourn the social media policy, not all.
Just for 1 second, please. You've had a point of order. You have to rule on that.
Be overruling that point of order, and I will be asking for a procedural motion. But before I do that, I've just been asked to extend tonight's meeting. Can I have a motion to Councillor Lawrence?
Yes, extend the meeting. I move that we extend the meeting.
Move to extend the meeting, and Councillor Greco to second that extension. Do I have that to go to vote, please? All those in favour? That's carried unanimously.
Before you move for a procedural motion, can I just have 1 minute?
Sure.
You have an option. Jacinta, can you just listen in? Can they take?
Means nothing.
Councillors, I'm going to ask if we can dissect this a little bit by moving 2 of the items and deferring the 3rd, so at least we can have 2 of those items go through for this evening. Can I ask that to occur this evening? Would that be a possibility?
You can take it in part.
So,
move it for part 2 and 3.
so can I ask that we have part 2 and 3?
I'll move that the motions be that the motion be separated, and that they be voted on separately, and that number 1 be deferred to the 27th of January, and that the other 2 be voted on here tonight.
Because we're separating the agenda item, do I need to get a vote for that? I don't need a motion for that. I just wanted to give you a heads up of how I felt about this at this point in time. So I'm now looking for a mover for number 2 and 3. Councillor Lawrence, I have a mover to move the item 2 and 3,
Yes,
and
I'd
Councillor Rennie as the seconder.
like
Thank
to
you.
move items 2 and 3 as the officers report.
Okay, I'm going over to Councillor McCarthy, who has a question. Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to understand where we are right now, Mayor, because there's been a couple of decisions. I'm the mover of the substantive motion that's listed. Until that motion is resolved, I'm still the mover. I'm still the mover of points 2 and 3, even if points 1 is deferred. Unless I withdraw my moving, that's my understanding. I seek governance advice, but I remain the mover of the motion until I withdraw or it's voted on.
Sorry, I've advised you badly.
I don't want to.
Trent, Councillor McCarthy, just to make it clear, because you were the mover, you would like to go forward in this and have that voted on?
Sorry, Mayor, just to be clear, if the question is, am I happy to move points 2 and 3 and the earlier point 4,
Yes.
which was listed, I'm happy to move that way. If it's about, if I'm being asked to, I just want to be clear, am I being asked that Council defers point 1? Because I'm not sure if we need to resolve that first. We haven't voted on that yet first. I'm happy to proceed with moving points 2, 3 and 4 on screen, if that's the question. Absolutely.
So through you, Mayor, Councillor McCarthy, you can ask, as the mover of the motion, for the Mayor to take all or part of that motion in part. So you could ask at this stage for the Mayor to take part 2, 3 and 4 in part, and then foreshadow in doing that that you're going to move a procedural motion to defer part 1.
Happy to move that way, Mayor, to keep us moving.
Okay.
Does the second have to do that? It's fine. No. So you can now put parts 2, 3.
Okay, so we're putting parts 2, 3 and 4 to vote.
Does anyone get to speak on that now? Anyone who hasn't spoken can still speak to it.
Mayor, I'm happy to move a procedural motion that we vote on points 2, 3 and 4 of the motion.
Okay, so you've put it to put. The fact that Councillor McCarthy has...
Yes, that's right.
I didn't hear that.
Seconding the procedural motion.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to ask councillors to vote on that item. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll go to the procedural motion.
Sorry, Mayor, I think we've voted to put the motion. I think we actually need to vote on the motion. We voted on the procedure. I think we need to now vote in favour or against of 2, 3 and 4, if I'm correct.
Sorry, my apologies.
That's right.
So now we need to vote for 3 and 4 of the... Sorry, 2, 3 and 4 of the motion.
Yes.
So all those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
So, sorry, what happens
We have a
to item
procedural
number-
motion. in relation to-
Can I move a procedural motion that item 1 be deferred to the meeting as previously noted?
So I have Councillor Lawrence, who's the mover for a procedural motion. Do I have a seconder for that procedural motion? Councillor Greco, thank you.
Through you, Mayor, if Councillor Lawrence could provide a date to which the item...
As previously mentioned, 27th, was it?
27th of February for that item to come back to council, yes. Okay, so we'll just have that item to be put.
We confirm the date for everyone.
Yes, confirming the date, which is the 27th of February, a Monday. It's the last Monday in February. You okay with that?
Yes.
All those in favour? That's carried. No, it's not carried. That's Councillor Hannan, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Demetriadis, Councillor Greco, Councillor Rennie, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Newton, Councillor Williams, and all against. Councillor Messina is abstaining. Thank you. (9.6) The Governance Report for December 2022. There are any questions to our officers on this agenda item? If we don't have any questions to our officers, then I will ask, do I have a motion? Councillor Rennie?
Thank you, Mayor Williams. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with the inclusion of a set of names which will have been provided to the governance team or the council business team, which include all of those council appointments to various committees. And I think it would be very useful if they could appear on screen because they are the variable in this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe I had Councillor Messina with her hand up.
Yeah, my hand up is in relation to my understanding, through you, Mayor, sorry, is that the officer's recommendation has extra points that have been circulated earlier, so I wonder if they're going to be included in the motion.
Thank you for that, Councillor Messina. Yes, I apologise. It was my intention to make sure they were included.
Thank you.
The updated recommendation.
I'm happy to second it if you're looking for a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Councillor Lawrence.
Mayor Williams, respectfully, I just ask a question about the W in my name.
About, apologies, I didn't hear what you just
About
said.
the W in my surname.
W?
It's you,
Yes,
not
we
W.
use a U because if you keep
Okay.
using W's, we'll run out of U's.
I guess a grammar.
Hypos.
Thank you.
Saint's name.
I thank
You
Council
don't want to be a
Business.
saint?
Thank Council Business for putting the amended recommendation. I wonder if we could go back to the table so that everyone has ample time to look at it.
Yes, thank you. We have Councillor Rennie as the mover and Councillor Messina as the seconder at this point in time.
I might also suggest that there is an inaccuracy here, which is that under the Darebin Creek Management Committee, Councillor Lawrence is listed as the chair. Council appoints councillors to that committee, and that committee, I believe, appoints a chair, so that word chair should just be removed from that table. I hope, Councillor Lawrence, that makes sense.
Thank you. Are we able to scroll down so we can get a full view of that item? Okay.
Yes, noting that there are some other committees listed. Those are the external committees. There might be a table B, I think. Thank you. These are the internal council committees. Mayor, I'll leave it to you to indicate when I should start speaking when councillors have had enough time to digest.
Thank you. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. This governance report comes to us at each council meeting, and tonight the item I think of particular significance is the appointment of councillors to various committees. These committees are both internal and external to Darebin Council, and I'd particularly like to thank and commend Mayor Williams for the very collaborative way in which she's gone about holding a conversation with all councillors about how we make these appointments. I do believe that if there are no amendments to this table tonight, it will be the first time in a very long time that we've reached agreement on these committees, and I think it's a real sign of a desire to move forward and work collaboratively. These committees are important and, in fact, I think noteworthy for the community because in many ways they represent much of the work that councillors do. The public often sees us in this setting, in the council meeting, but each of us who has been on so many of these committees knows that a lot of the work happens behind the scenes in the way in which we chair these important advisory committees, in the way in which we engage with community members, listen to their views and learn from their experiences, which is actually the most powerful thing, or one of the very powerful inputs into our decision making. So not only do I celebrate all the councillors who have put their hands up for so many committees, but all of the committee members who participate, and I think that's a very important thing. Tonight's governance report also has a couple of other noteworthy items in it. One that I highlight to people is some results from the Darebin Annual Community Survey. 1,000 residents were surveyed about their experiences of council. This tends to go up and down each year, but really pleasingly in terms of the kind of significant picture in terms of overall performance. Scores are out of 10. Darebin had an overall performance of 6.79 and the metropolitan Melbourne average was 6.5. So, you know, whilst there are ups and downs each year, I think for many years now we have performed on this measure, and it is just one measure, but we have performed above the metropolitan average, and I think that's pleasing, and it's a reflection on the very hard work of our staff, and particularly our customer service teams who are at the coalface of dealing with those inquiries. I suspect other councillors will have much to say about other elements of the governance report, but I commend it to you, and I look forward to our agreement tonight signalling a new way forward in terms of how we appoint to committees across council.
Councillor Messina, you're the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Really excited about this report. Yes, it's a little bit different, vastly different last year when there was hardly any collaboration in terms of working together with these committees. But this is a platform where we listen, where we collaborate, and this is the evolution of our community. This is where we make decisions by when we listen to our community members based on the committees. Committee members are volunteers, so the Darebin community thanks you for your time and your patience and your thought thinking and your strategic agendas moving forward. Darebin Council thanks you for that also. We also look forward to Recycling Victoria and see what the new Minister Ingrid Stitt is going to do with that. And also look forward to my favourite, the Audit and Risk Committee. So congratulations to all the appointments at my fellow councillors of the Mayor in terms of what committees, and I look forward to some of the outcomes that will drive the agenda of this council moving forward.
Do I have any other councillors that would like to speak for the item? Any councillors that would like to speak against the item? I'll put that item to vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. I also would like to say a big thank you to councillors and all our committees, because I know the amount of hours that go behind the scenes in coming together, and some wonderful outcomes have come from those committees. So thank you. Item 10, items to be tabled. If there are no items to be tabled tonight, are there? I believe no. No, thank you. Item number 11, we've got notice of motion. So this evening we have a notice of motion from Councillor Newton. Councillor Newton, do you wish to move the motion this evening? Thank you. And do we have a seconder to that motion? Councillor McCarthy. Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. First, I'd like to acknowledge Sean Mulcahy in the audience from the Victorian Pride Lobby and the members of the Sexuality, Sex and Gender Diversity Advisory Committee that worked with me on this motion. So I'm really grateful to them for this. So what we're putting forward tonight is a notice of motion of support for trans and gender diverse people in sport. I think this is both timely but also something that Darebin has been a leader in and continues to be a leader in. This is about equality for all, and the reason why we're putting this forward is because as a leader in trans, gender diverse and LGBTIQA+ inclusion, it's timely for us to reaffirm our support for trans and gender diverse people in sport. I don't think I can say clearly enough that we oppose transphobia and transmisogyny in all its forms and discrimination of all kinds. So this publicly shows our support for the trans and gender diverse people who participate in sport, which is crucial to health, fitness and community building locally. I think that says it all, and I'm very much hoping that this gets unanimous support tonight.
Councillor McCarthy, as you've been the seconder, would you like to speak to the item?
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to commend Councillor Newton on her initiative in bringing this to us, and also the recognition of the work of one of our committees, which is quite fitting given the previous item that we referred to, and also recognise Sean Mulcahy for his presence here this evening from the Victorian Pride Lobby. Having brought the first motion in this chamber back in 2010, I believe it was, which I thank Councillor Greco for seconding at the time, which was at that time for Darebin Council to do the first Idaho, which became Idahobbit event, which was really about recognising that in our community, like so many communities, we have community members who feel, for a whole lot of reasons, shut out from community life. It's been amazing to see where this work has grown to the point where we are now in the space where we have the policy settings we need to review our policy settings. And I think it's important to recognise that it's one thing to have a policy, it's another thing to say, do we need to tweak things? Do we need to revise things? When it comes to the inclusion of people in sport and obviously also in our various recreational activities in Darebin and our sporting clubs, we have a really important leadership role to play here as a council, because we can do that through our facilities, we can do that through our relationships with local clubs, and I note that we have the recognition of clubs in Darebin that have already done some leadership work in this space, and we commend them for their initiative. But we also know that some of our clubs, this is new territory for them, and we want to partner with them, we want to support them and make sure that they can be inclusive places. We know they want to revitalise their membership and be inclusive as well. And so that's really what this is about doing that work, building on the strength that Darebin already has in this space. But of course, making it very clear that this is a council that takes a very strong stand of inclusion and stands against transphobia and transmisogyny. So once again, I just wanted to echo Councillor Newton's comments. We are a leader as a council in this space, and we've got to keep a check on how we're going and what's next as well.
Thank you. Are there any further councillors that would like to speak to the agenda item? The notice of motion, I should say. Any councillors against? Then I will put that item to vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Been on this council for 10 years. I'm very proud, as you've noticed, that this council is very, very forward, very progressive in just in 2 items just this evening, which was the solar savers, and now this evening regarding the trans and gender diverse swim night, which we were the first councillors to do that in any other municipality. So that's just 2 items. I'll go on to item 12, which is urgent business. Peter, is there any urgent business this evening that we need to consider?
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 urgent items to be admitted to the agenda. There's a Care Finder service contract, which will be considered in the confidential section of the agenda. It's deemed confidential pursuant to Section 3, Part 1 of the Local Government Act, specifically council business information that would prejudice the council's positions in commercial negotiations if prematurely released. And the second is a public item, which I would require you to move, Mayor, which is in relation to the crisis relief for subtenants of the Melbourne Innovation Centre, which is run by the entity Darebin Enterprise Centre Limited.
Thank you.
Mayor, would it be appropriate to move a procedural motion to hear the public item first?
We're in public, so we can do it.
Yeah.
We don't
Need a Mr. Procedural.
Thank you for your assistance, Councillor Rennie. We're in public, I believe, so we will take that item first anyway, and then the Mayor will move for confidential.
In accordance with Governance Rules 4.1F, I would like to move this motion. Therefore, I call on the Deputy Mayor to take the chair for this agenda item. So, Councillor Newton, thank you. Yep, we'll swap seats.
Excuse me, Deputy Mayor Newton, I'd like to see the urgent motion written before I state whether I have a conflict or not, please.
Sure. Can we get the urgent motion on screen, please? Thanks. So this is the urgent item 12.1, crisis relief for subtenants of Melbourne Innovation Centre, Darebin Enterprise Centre Limited, and I'll give an opportunity for any councillors that would like to declare a conflict of interest to do so, but I'll give you a chance to read through the motion.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, can we please have the font larger, or can we have it
Yes.
circulated, please?
Yes, can we make the font larger, please? Thanks.
Acting Deputy Mayor, if I may,
Yes, Councillor
ask
Greco.
for your indulgence. Given, from my understanding, that we haven't received the report on this, would it be appropriate for our CEO or one of our officers to give us, just to put in context what this motion is, because it's a very lengthy motion,
Yes.
not only for our benefit, but also for the benefit of people that are watching this meeting.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Greco. Over to you, CEO Peter Smith.
Thank you, and thanks for that suggestion, Councillor Greco, and apologies, this is urgent. It's our last meeting of the year. So the motion to be put by the Mayor notes that we're still assessing obligations in relation to the lease agreement, both the MIC's obligations ourselves, that's just for you to note. Notes the incident occurred in late November where a small piece of asbestos roof came off the roof, and notes that we also engaged, as part of that review of the lease, an environmental assessment which required us, through part 4 of this, to temporarily close 2 buildings on the site to allow for testing and deep cleaning and remediation works, given the presence of asbestos dust. And we've actually publicly released those reports so that we're fully transparent on the findings of that testing. It notes in part 5 that the site is largely operating apart from 11 tenants who have not been able to access their buildings in 2 buildings, and that there is no known impact on the rest of the site or surrounding areas. That's part 5. Part 6 asks us you to publicly note that we've been communicating with Melbourne Innovation Centre as their tenants daily during this time to provide updates and assist the MIC's ability to communicate with their tenants. These are tenants of MIC, not of council. Part 7 is probably the core of this urgent motion, which noticed there are a number of businesses that have been impacted by the situation due to the location, 11 tenants in total. 8
Excuse
provides...
me, CEO. I have an indication from Councillor Messina that she would like to declare a conflict, so I'm sorry to interrupt.
I'm so sorry.
But
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
would
you,
you?
Deputy Mayor.
So you'd like to
Yes,
excuse
I'd
yourself
like to
from the
declare
room?
now that
Yep.
I'm reading the whole item of urgent business, I have a conflict, given that I'm Director of MIC in relation to the grant that will be given to MIC. So I'd like to excuse myself from this item of urgent business. I'd also like to publicly state that the next item of urgent business, I also have a conflict.
Sure.
Therefore, my participation in this particular council meeting will cease as of now.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. And are there any other conflicts to declare?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Alongside Councillor Messina, I will also declare what I understand is a material conflict of interest, given that I'm also a Director of MIC through council appointment, but all the same. That conflict, I believe, exists, and therefore I'll be leaving the meeting for this item, and I'll be asked to return once this item has been dealt with.
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Messina and Councillor McCarthy to leave the room, and then we will return to the CEO. And I do again apologise for interrupting. So we'll just wait for the councillors to leave the room. Thanks.
Through you, Deputy Mayor.
Go ahead. Yep.
Sorry, I should have, I thought this had been circulated and we'd managed that issue, so apologies, it's a bit late. So I think part 7 and 8 are the key parts of this. So noting the impact on businesses, many small businesses. Part 8 resolves to establish a grant of which we have money available to the Melbourne Innovation Centre for the specific purpose of immediate and equitable relief. Now, equitable means that we will target the businesses who aren't able to help themselves, which is largely going to be small businesses who have been impacted, and focusing on those 11 tenants. So our focus of the Melbourne Innovation Centre is start-up businesses, and we will work in the grant guidelines to MIC to make sure that those who get that help and probably aren't able to help themselves are the beneficiaries of this grant. and that will be covered in Part 9. So Part 9 of me writing to the MIC would cover the purpose and targeting of that grant to try and target the small businesses that have been impacted and give them a little bit of a handout. It's a grant to MIC as our tenant for MIC to distribute to their tenants.
Thank you, CEO. And can I please request an extension of time from a councillor? Councillor Greco to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rennie. All those in favour? Great. We've got an extension of time for 30 minutes, and this is the last extension that we can have. So we've heard from the CEO. So, councillors, are there any questions of the officers regarding this item? Councillor Greco.
Just very quickly, I was wondering if the CEO can provide us some information in light of what we heard earlier this evening from one of the members of the gallery, and how what the implications of that would be, and how that could be accommodated in terms of the proposal that they put forward. Essentially, that we deal directly with the tenants that were dealing with MIC. I think that was her key point.
Peter,
thanks.
I prefer to take that item in confidence. There's a confidential item. If Councillor Greco, would you mind asking that question when we go into confidence? I'll respond in it then I can give a fuller answer for you. But for the public, I'm able to answer part of it publicly for public transparency, but I'm also happy to take that question in confidence. The questions raised earlier tonight were in relation to licence arrangements between MIC and their tenants, being the farmers market and the mushroom business. We learned tonight that the mushroom business was a tenant of MIC, licensee of MIC, not the farmers market. The farmers market does have sub-licences as well, so it's quite a complex hierarchical licence structure. Our obligation is to encourage MIC to meet their objectives under the lease, which is to support great businesses like the Melbourne Farmers Market, who in turn support small innovators. So the answer given by Ms Watson is correct. We believe the MIC should renew those licences for those innovative businesses until the end of the lease period, because that's all they can do at the moment. And it will come to council in the new year in terms of renewal of that lease, as any lease would. There'll be a consideration of that renewal of the lease in the new year by council, which will give longer term certainty. In terms of other options for that, to answer those questions, I'd prefer to answer some of those in confidence tonight.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. So, councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Williams. Are you moving the officer's recommendation?
Yes, I am.
And do I have a seconder? Councillor Rennie. Go ahead, Councillor Williams. Thanks.
Due to unexpected circumstances on tenants at MIC and the timing that is so close to Christmas, Darebin Council would like to offer a crisis grant of $20,000 to the Melbourne Innovation Centre as goodwill to help and assist and support those tenants, particularly the small businesses that have been impacted due to the result of this current disruption. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Rennie, as a seconder, would you like to speak?
No, I think Mayor Williams has covered it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers for? Are there any speakers against? No. I'll put that to the vote. All in favour? That's carried unanimously, and I'll ask Mayor Williams to resume the chair. And we will ask for Councillor McCarthy to return to the room. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll go to item 13, consideration of reports considered confidential. Councillors, there are 3 confidential reports to be considered this evening. Therefore, I will be closing the meeting to the public, and in accordance to section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020, Council may resolve to close the meeting to members of the public to consider the item designated confidential by the CEO in accordance to section 3(1) of the Act. And councillors, do I have a mover of the recommendation? Councillor Rennie is the mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence. I'd like to, I guess there's no debate, I'd like to put that item to vote. All those in favour? Thank you, and that is carried unanimously. I would like to confirm with our officers that this meeting is now closed at... No time's coming up on this. 9:39 p.m. Thank you.